Chapter 559. In midair, Gold Horn and Silver Horn streaked across the sky at a speed several times faster than lightning, leaving two beams of cold light in their wake. More than 300 miles behind them, a green flying ship was chasing after them with a blinding green light, but it could not close the gap between them. Instead, it was getting further and further away. Apart from the fact that the dragon pythons of fire and ice could breathe fire and ice out of their mouths, which could destroy all kinds of immortal items and magical treasures, and were ferocious and unstoppable, their greatest characteristic was their incredible flying speed. In the ancient times, they were so infamous that countless almighty experts of the ancient times trembled with fear at the mere mention of their name. Once they were targeted by such ferocious creatures, they could neither defeat nor escape. Even the winged dragons of the true dragon clan could not outrun them in speed. To be exact, Gold Horn and Silver Horn could only be regarded as having just grown a pair of wings, and had yet to completely master the various divine abilities and techniques in the dragon python mystic scripture. But, they were already flying at an incredible speed. Even though Li Qinghua was accompanied by an immortal flying ship crafted by his father, it was still difficult for him to catch up with Gold Horn and Silver Horn, who had risked their lives. Leaning against Gold Horn's claw, Princess Xianglu, whose face was as pale as a sheet of paper, had her eyes closed and both hands locked into an incantation gesture before her dantian. The natural energy kept rushing into her body, turning into a five-colored divine ray that rolled and surged around her. Princess Xianglu had entered the state of enlightenment, and was healing her wounded body at an incredible speed. Wherever Gold Horn and Silver Horn flew past, countless flowers, plants, and trees in the forest released a wisp of life force at the same time, which transformed into a vast stream of green light and poured into Princess Xianglu's body. Princess Xianglu was severely injured when she was struck by 360 thunderbolts in a row. But, as she had absorbed the life force offered by the flowers, trees, and various other natural creatures, her injury was not a big deal. The flight went on for 3 days and 3 nights, and Gold Horn and Silver Horn were so tired that they were foaming at the mouth. Li Qinghua's flying boat had been thrown thousands of miles away, but it still couldn't get rid of them. With a distance of over 1,000 miles, even the weakest 36th tier heaven immortal could locate Gold Horn and Silver Horn with his divine will. So, it was not enough to escape from the pursuit of the immortals led by Li Qinghua. A large amount of saliva gushed out from the corner of Jin Jiao's mouth. "Let's stop and fight them. We've just eaten a lot of immortal souls, and we haven't had time to digest them. If we keep running like this, we won't be able to control the immortal souls we've absorbed with our remaining energy. It's such a waste." Silverhorn shook his head and grunted, "I'm tired. My wings are cramping. Let's go all out and fight them." Princess Xianglu opened her eyes slightly and said calmly, "Hold on for another 2 hours." Upon hearing Princess Xianglu's words, Gold Horn and Silver Horn nodded repeatedly. Flapping their wings with all their might, they sped up and fled into the distance. Princess Xianglu took a deep breath, then began to sing an ancient ballad that was filled with an evil air, making one feel as if their soul was about to fly out of their body. As Princess Xianglu sang, a vague, mysterious aura seeped out of the surrounding void and quietly gathered in Princess Xianglu's palm. The earth was shaking, the air was echoing, the rivers and lakes were leaping, the flowers and trees were laughing, and the birds and beasts in the mountains were dancing in the air. Even with the divine will of an immortal cultivator, a great deal of inexplicable energy was seeping out and pouring into Princess Xianglu's palm. In her palm, a faintly discernible, pale gray ball of light, 3 feet and 6 inches in diameter, was condensed. As the song continued, Princess Xianglu bit her fingertip and dripped 13 drops of blood essence into the ball of light. When the blood entered the ball of light, it rippled and turned into a hazy mist of blood, which gradually condensed into 13 vague shadows of ghosts and deities. A great deal of inexplicable energy from all living things kept pouring into these 13 shadows of ghosts and deities, making their figures clearer and clearer. Vaguely, shrill ghost howls could be heard coming out of these 13 shadows of ghosts and deities. Wherever Gold Horn and Silver Horn flew past, large sheets of dark clouds rolled and rolled toward them, while the natural phenomena of wind, rain, thunder, and lightning were stirred up around them. Strong winds howled, dark clouds rolled, thunder flashed, and electric arcs filled the sky. All kinds of natural forces were injected into the ball of light in Princess Zhongli's palm, as well as into the 13 shadows of ghosts and deities, who were now several inches tall and looked exactly like real humans. Suddenly, a 5-colored divine ray shot out of the center of Princess Zhongli's brows, condensing into numerous runes the size of sesame seeds in the ball of light. Sparkling and translucent talismans were constantly imprinted on these ghosts and deities. Every talisman imprinted on these ghosts and deities would cause them to let out shrill screams. It was as if these talismans were soldering iron, causing these ghosts and deities to feel endless pain. The ball of light emitted a faint glow. The energy that had poured into it from the outside world had accumulated into a large cloud of smoke, in which the shadows of ghosts and deities were shuttling and wheeling at high speed. Goldhorn and Silverhorn gradually slowed down. Their physical strength had been exhausted to the limit. Now, they were only relying on the ferocious energy in the bones of dragon pythons to fly. Their eyes were bloodshot, sticky saliva was constantly spraying out of the corners of their mouths, and their fleshy wings were beating the air with all their might, producing loud, hollow noises. Li Qinghua's flying ship had gradually caught up with them. With dozens of heaven immortals taking turns to inject immortal energy into the ship, their energy consumption was much lower than that of Goldhorn and Silverhorn. Although Goldhorn and Silverhorn's physical strength was running low, the flying ship still maintained its initial high speed. Accompanied by a shrill whistle, the ship was now less than 100 miles behind Goldhorn and Silverhorn. After holding on for another hour, the flying ship was almost flying shoulder to shoulder with Goldhorn and Silverhorn. Li Qinghua's laughter rang out, "Don't run anymore, guys. I only need the internal organs of those 2 dragon pythons, and I can make some spirit ointments out of them. As for their souls, I can let them keep a wisp of their souls for reincarnation." As for the girl with the 5-colored auspicious light. After a brief pause, Li Qinghua said gently, "May I ask your name, miss? I happen to be in need of a few confidants in my palace." Princess Zhongli gave the flying ship a cold look. Holding the glowing ball with both hands, she slowly cast a few profound incantation gestures at it. The ball gradually shrank, and even the smoke cloud, which was the energy contributed by countless living beings along the way, was forced into the 13 shadows of ghosts and deities. After absorbing an enormous amount of energy, the shadows of ghosts and deities gradually turned illusory, and their bodies, which were no different from living beings, gradually became transparent, so much so that even divine sense could not capture their existence. Suddenly, Goldhorn and Silverhorn stopped flying. Panting violently, they cried out, "Let's fight to the death. We can't fly anymore." Amidst the panting sounds, Goldhorn and Silverhorn's bodies shrank to about 30 feet long. Gnashing their teeth, they came in front of Princess Zhonglu. Jin Jiao said angrily, "You want to concoct medicine with our internal organs? Dream on. Ka, I'll eat you." Silverhorn spat on the ground and was about to say something when Princess Zhonglu said slowly, "Li Qinghua, the young master of Myriad Immortal Alliance. No matter who you are, I'll make you pay for what you did today 100 times over." Li Qinghua laughed mockingly as he put away the flying ship. Together with dozens of heaven immortals, he surrounded Princess Zhonglu and her companions. Looking at Princess Zhonglu, he said with a smile, "Why do you have to be so murderous? I have a tender heart for the fairer sex, but judging from your appearance and demeanor, you must be from an extraordinary family." Princess Zhonglu did not let Li Qinghua finish his words. She raised her right hand and gently blew at the 13 illusionary figures of fiend gods in her palm. Immediately, a fierce wind rose from the ground, as if the earth had become the source of all the storms in the world. 1,000 miles in diameter rolled up, and a black storm rose whistling into the sky. Vaguely, one could see the shadows of countless ghosts and deities twisting and struggling in the black storm, and the ghastly aura of death made Li Qinghua and the heaven immortals around him shudder at the same time. As the black storm approached, Li Qinghua and the heaven immortals around him unleashed their defensive immortal artifacts at the same time. Auspicious lights of various colors enveloped the heaven immortals as the black storm blew at them, producing a harsh sound of friction and causing sparks to spray out of their bodies. A few heaven immortals with weaker cultivation bases were blown away by the wind, unable to keep their footing in the air. Amidst the storm, a few faintly discernible shadows flickered, and the few heaven immortals who had their bodies shaken suddenly stiffened. Then, they let out despairing howls. Their immortal items did not react at all, and their bodies were crushed into minced meat. A great deal of golden blood sprayed out of their mouths, and in the blink of an eye, all the blood was sucked dry, leaving only a few gray ashes drifting in all directions. Li Qinghua was horrified. What kind of fiend technique is this? Princess Xianglu smiled faintly and said sarcastically, "This is an ancient divine magic. How can it be a fiend technique?" Before her voice had died away, Li Qinghua's body suddenly stiffened. Some mysterious and terrible existence had penetrated his defensive immortal artifact and invaded his body. All of a sudden, Li Qinghua's left arm exploded into a cloud of blood and gore. Then, all the energy essence was sucked away by some invisible existence, leaving only gray ashes drifting in the air. Li Qinghua screamed with fear, and the pain made tears come out of his eyes. Looking at Princess Xianglu in horror, he snapped, You witch! After I capture you alive, I'll make you suffer all the tortures in the world before you die. I'm going to toy with you to death." Princess Xiangli's face darkened. With a casual wave of her finger, the bodies of the few heaven immortals around Li Qinghua were suddenly riddled with holes of various sizes, and some of their bodies were also devoured by the invisible existence. Li Qinghua froze for a moment, then suddenly cried out, "Run!" Then, a golden talisman shot out from between his brows. A mass of golden light wrapped him and all the heaven immortals around him, and they disappeared without a trace. Princess Xianglu coughed up a mouthful of blood, and then a large amount of blood flowed out of her 7 orifices at the same time. Trembling, she grabbed the catfish flood dragon and said in a low voice, "Let's go. This reverse mysterious great void divine technique is beyond the limit of what I can bear now. I had to use the source power of my divine soul to unleash it. At least I managed to scare them away. Let's go." Catfish was horrified. Lord Xiansheng let out a long roar and abruptly transformed into a dragon hundreds of feet long, grabbed all the people, and fled in a random direction. A quarter of an hour later, an urgent wanted order spread within the Union of 10,000 Immortals, and all the allies of the Union of 10,000 Immortals received this wanted order. The elders of the Divine Hall, the core of the Alliance's power, had jointly issued an order to hunt down a group of cultivators who brought along dragon pythons of fire and ice. Attached to the warrant was a clear picture of Princess Xianglu and her companions. Chapter 560. In Anyi County, Zhong Province, Diyu Province. The Princess of Anyi had already fled with all her family members. No one knew where they had gone. He was Feng Lingling's confidant, and his whole clan had been a vassal clan of Feng clan for countless years. After learning that Zhongning's city had been slaughtered, and that Feng Lingling had been stripped of his title of marquis and removed from the throne of prefecture overseer of Zhong province, the Princess of Anyi naturally had to consider the safety of her own clan, and so she fled with all her clansmen and properties. A huge power vacuum immediately appeared in Anyi County. The whole county was in a mess, and no one cared about the government affairs anymore. Under such a wonderful opportunity, Wu Qi came to the nameless mountain in the southwest corner of Anyi County with many disciples of the underhand sect. The nameless mountain was now named Mount Picking Star by Wu Qi, and even a nearby mountain range was called the Mount Picking Star by Wu Qi. The main peak of Mount Picking Star was 127 miles high and stretched for more than 700,000 miles. It occupied most of the territory of Anyi County. On the mountainside of the main peak of Mount Picking Star, in the middle of a cliff that reached a height of 100 miles, Wu Qi had opened up a platform with a circumference of 100 acres. He had temporarily transplanted some green pines, cypresses, and exotic flowers on it, and had even dug out a few ponds to draw snow water from the top of the mountain as the water source. At the end of the platform was an arched door about 30 feet high and 20 feet wide. A plaque was mounted on the lintel of the door, on which were carved the words Underhand Sect. Through this arched door and 100 miles into the belly of the mountain, there was the immortal energy vein which he had found in the copy of Pangu's map of the mountains and rivers. Rich immortal energy rolled up from the ground, creating a blessed land of 100 miles in circumference in the belly of the mountain. The blessed land had 18 floors, measuring 108 miles in circumference. Each floor was as bright as day, and filled with countless exotic flowers and plants. As long as some houses and pavilions were built, this would be the most suitable place for cultivation. After providing Supremacy 3 Flame and Eugene with some formation designs and the various extraordinary treasures he looted from the prefecture overseer mansion, Wuqi left the heavy responsibility of building a cave abode and building the sect to the others. After that, he came to the lowest level of the natural blessed land, found the eye of the spirit cave, which had the densest immortal energy, and sat cross-legged in it, exercising his cultivation and regulating his breath. Not only did he devour 6 young gods, the immense power of wind contained in their bodies allowed Wuqi to smoothly break through to the 21st tier heaven immortal realm. However, devouring the wooden puppet had brought him quite a bit of trouble. His true spirit had been wiped out by Wuqi, and all his understanding of the law of wind had become Wuqi's understanding of the heavenly Tao. However, his immense divine energy was a little hard for Wuqi to digest. Wooden Puppet was a god born from the heaven and earth dozens of eons ago, and the accumulation of such a long period of time had given him an enormous divine energy, at least hundreds of times stronger than Wuqi's current strength. Wuqi was like a little snake that had devoured an elephant. It was because of the magical chaotic energy that he was not stuffed to death. He had to devour and absorb Wooden Puppet's energy as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would feel like he was carrying a bomb in his body at any time, and he had no idea when it would explode. Therefore, he hurriedly returned to Anhui City in Anlu County, brought all the disciples of Underhand Sect to Mount Picking Star, and left everything to Supremacy 3 Flame and Eugene, while he went into a secluded cultivation, focusing all his attention on devouring and absorbing Wooden Puppet's energy. Wuqi was hoping that once he devoured all of Wooden Puppet's divine energy and transformed it into chaotic energy, to what extent would his cultivation base improve? A high-tier heaven immortal. He would at least have the cultivation base of a high-tier heaven immortal. Or perhaps, he could transform into a top-tier heaven immortal. In the 18th level of Mount Picking Star, in the deepest level of the cave abode thousands of miles underground, the rich immortal energy had condensed and compressed into a purple-golden liquid, turning into a spring in the eye of the spirit cave. Wuqi was sitting cross-legged in the spring, constantly inhaling and exhaling the immortal energy around him, trying his best to digest the enormous divine energy that came from Wooden Puppet. Wooden Puppet's divine energy hovered inside Wuqi's body like a star, emitting a dazzling divine light from time to time. Wuqi's chaotic energy had transformed into a millstone, grinding off tiny pieces of divine energy from Wooden Puppet's divine energy and turning them into chaos. At the same time, Wuqi exercised the foundational cultivation technique of True Body of Heaven and Earth Scripture and the 7 Foundation Elevating Technique, as well as all the other divine abilities and mystic techniques. Bright lights of various colors flickered all over his body as he slowly transformed Wooden Puppet's divine energy into his own. The Song of Gale, Dark Een Water Scripture, Inferno Hell Fiend Scripture, and many other insights of the heavenly Tao kept fusing into his divine soul. He had entered a mysterious and unfathomable state of enlightenment, quietly comprehending all the profound mysteries. His cultivation base was improving step by step, and his magic power was getting stronger and stronger. But the fastest improvement was the True Body of Heaven and Earth Scripture. The strength of Wuqi's fleshly body was advancing at a terrifying speed. It seemed that the chaotic spirit body was particularly suitable for the cultivation of the True Body of Heaven and Earth Scripture. Within 1,000,000 miles around Mount Picking Star, the strange purple mist released by Pangu continent did not need to be absorbed by Wuqi at all. They were voluntarily injected into Wuqi's body, causing Wuqi's fleshly body to grow stronger rapidly. If Cheong Chan, who had taught Wuqi the True Body of Heaven and Earth Scripture, were here, he would also be shocked by Wuqi's absurd cultivation speed. Time went by, and in the blink of an eye, 7 days and 7 nights had passed since Wu Qi devoured Wooden Puppet and the other gods. About 10% of Wooden Puppet's divine energy had been transformed by Wu Qi. However, Wu Qi was not in a hurry to make a breakthrough in his cultivation base. Instead, he was cultivating his foundation to a very strong level. The chaotic energy in his body, be it in quantity or quality, had improved greatly compared to 7 days ago. The mysteries of heaven and earth in the Song of Gale and the other mystic techniques were swirling in Wu Qi's divine soul. As he carefully pondered over the endless mysteries, 2 lines of tears trickled down from the corners of his eyes. The mysteries of heaven and earth were extremely profound. The more he comprehended about it, the more cleansing Wu Qi's soul would be. Therefore, his tears were flowing uncontrollably. Just when Wu Qi was in the middle of his cultivation, Supremacy 3 Flame came hurriedly to the place where Wu Qi was cultivating in seclusion. Looking at Wu Qi, who was sitting cross-legged in the golden-purple spring water condensed from rich immortal energy, his body rocking and rolling into a chaotic pattern of taiji, Supremacy 3 Flame smacked his lips enviously. Then, he threw a punch at Wu Qi and said, "Stop cultivating. Something big has happened." Wu Qi opened his eyes abruptly. He gulped down a mouthful of spring water condensed from immortal energy and burped comfortably. Then, he looked at Supremacy 3 Flame with a puzzled expression and asked, "What's the matter?" Feng Lingling, who had escaped, was caught. Dismembered by 5 horses. Or is there a new prefecture overseer in Zhong province? Has someone inherited the throne of prefecture overseer and begun to carry out a great purge in Zhong province? Supremacy 3 Flame shook his head. He fished out the medallion of Myriad Immortal Alliance and casually pointed at it. A screen of light rushed out of it. He shouted, "What does the chaos in Central Plains have to do with me?" TSK, something big has happened in Myriad Immortal Alliance. The Divine Hall of Myriad Immortal Alliance has issued an arrest warrant, offering 3 rewards to hunt down these people. Supremacy 3 Flame went on and on, 3 conditions, the 3 conditions promised by those elders of Divine Hall. TSK, if we can capture these people, Lao Tzu will ask them to help Lao Tzu attain the cultivation base of Gold Immortal Realm, and then ask for a few Gold Immortal items and a good foundation. With that, the Underhand sect will be really rich. Wu Qi was taken aback. He turned to look at the flickering light screen, where Princess Zhang Lu and her companions could be seen. Supremacy 3 Flame explained the origin of the arrest warrant to Wu Qi in a long-winded manner. The Elders of Divine Hall, which had the highest status in Myriad Immortal Alliance, had jointly approved the arrest warrant. As long as one could capture those people in the light screen, he or she would receive the 3 rewards promised by Divine Hall, no matter what they were. If one's overall strength was insufficient to capture these people, as long as one could provide information about them, he or she would be rewarded handsomely by Divine Hall. Finally, Supremacy 3 Flame told Wu Qi that through the internal intelligence system of Myriad Immortal Alliance, he had learned that all the allies of Wandering Immortal Hall on Panga Continent had begun to act. An invisible net had been spread across Panga Continent, and there was no way these people could escape the pursuit and capture of countless allies. Wu Qi stared blankly at Princess Zhang Lu and her companions on the light screen. "I can't believe this little girl brought her people to Panga Continent. She was fine. She had successfully escaped from Patriarch Yuanhua's hands, and now she brought people to Panga Continent. Didn't she know how dangerous the journey was? Why didn't she stay with Yan Dan? Why did she have to come here?" Shaking his head, Wu Qi asked in a strange tone, "Did Myriad Immortal Alliance say why they are wanted?" Supremacy 3 Flame did not notice the unsightly expression on Wu Qi's face. "Do you still remember those spirit herbs offered by Myriad Immortal Alliance a few years ago? More than 20 spirit herbs have not been collected until now, but the spirit paste concocted from the internal organs of dragon pythons of fire and ice can replace them. These 2 pythons are for the concoction. As for this beautiful girl..." He laughed strangely, then smacked his lips, shook his head, and said with a sigh, "She has caught the eye of the young master of Myriad Immortal Alliance, and he wants to bring her back to the palace to be his maidservant." While Supremacy 3 Flame was still laughing, Wu Qi had already let out a long, forlorn howl as he thrust his fist towards Supremacy 3 Flame's face. The fist was still a few feet away from Supremacy 3 Flame, but a terrible force had already frozen all the immortal energy in Supremacy 3 Flame's body, rendering him unable to move. Supremacy 3 Flame let out a despairing roar. His eyes went wide as he stared fixedly at the fist, which was powerful enough to completely destroy his immortal body and immortal soul. Even in his wildest dreams, he could not understand why Wu Qi had suddenly become so powerful. When the fist was 3 inches away from Supremacy 3 Flame, Wu Qi stopped abruptly. Slowly, he retracted his fist and rose to his feet. Staring at the light screen, he sneered and said, "That girl's name is Zi Xian, and she is my lover." Supremacy 3 Flame's jaw dropped, and he could not come to his senses for a long time. Looking at the others on the light screen, Wu Qi said coolly, "They are my brothers, my friends, my juniors. The young master of Myriad Immortal Alliance." He, I said I want to destroy Myriad Immortal Alliance, okay?" Supremacy 3 Flame scratched his head in distress. He heaved a long sigh, shook his head, and said, "Then, let me help you pass the knife." Wu Qi threw his head back and laughed. With his eyes bloodshot, he suddenly shot up into the sky, transformed into a clump of fiend energy, and rushed out of Picking Star Mountain. Chapter 561. With a blink, Wu Qi arrived in Anhe City, exercising an escape art and arriving at the punishment court. With a flash of dark smoke, he revealed himself before Yen Bugui. The dark storm swept across an area of 1,000 miles in circumference, turning into a shadow of death as it rolled and sped forward. Like a swimming fish, he swam through the boundless power of the stars, and gradually, he found a very powerful force of stars, which was heading in the same direction as him. Without hesitation, he fused with the power of the stars. A blinding silver light flashed across the sky, and with the help of the power of the stars, Wu Qi traveled several billion miles in just a blink of an eye, crossing the territory of 2 provinces in the blink of an eye. Grabbing the black jade talisman, Wu Qi cried out in a deep voice, "Quickly tell me the incantation and the incantation." Zhang Lu is in trouble. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi bowed deeply to Su Qin and said, "There's no need for me to go with you. Pardon me, but with your cultivation base, I don't think you can be of any help. If you trust me, Mr. Su Qin, please teach me the 7 luminary star fixing technique." Raising his head, Wu Qi stared at Su Qin and said in a deep voice without blinking, "If Mr. feels that I'm at a disadvantage, I can use the cultivation technique that leads straight to the realm of gold immortal to exchange for the 7 luminary star fixing technique." While cursing and swearing along the way, Wu Qi took out the communication jade talisman and kept performing incantation gestures and reciting incantation gestures, releasing the information that he was in the vicinity. Yen Bugui let out a few loud laughs. A group of elites from the scouting office gathered together and began discussing with the cunning Su Qin. Since Princess Zhanglu had come to Pangu continent, there was no reason for her not to inform Yen Dan, and there was no reason why she could not get a communication talisman that was specially used by the people of Great Yen Dynasty. Wu Qi firmly believed that with the talisman, he would be able to find Princess Zhanglu. More than 10,000 immortals were killed by Wu Qi's storm, be they immortals, cultivators, or innocent passers-by. All the immortals were torn to pieces. Apart from a portion of their immortal energy and blood essence, which were absorbed by Wu Qi, the other 80% were happily swallowed by Ao Buzan. A silver starlight condensed on Su Qin's fingertips, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a fluorescent jade slip. He concentrated and copied the 7 luminary star fixing technique into the jade slip, then threw it to Wu Qi and said seriously, "The power of the heavenly stars is subtle and unpredictable. The orbit of the stars could determine a person's fate, fortune, or misfortune. The mysteries contained within were boundless. Don't act recklessly." Su Qin opened his mouth and spat at Wu Qi. "Do I look like the kind of person who covets the things of the younger generation? The 7 luminary star fixing technique is not something extraordinary, and I'll teach it to you." If there are benefits in the future, please take care of my children and juniors. Cut the crap. Wu Qi cried out anxiously. Zhang Lu brought his men to Pangu continent and bumped into the young master of Myriad Immortal Alliance. He is being hunted by them now. Myriad Immortal Alliance is an alliance of almost all the itinerant immortals on Pangu continent, and its potential power is extremely strong. Quickly tell me the incantation, and I'll go look for them now. We are definitely no match for them if we fight them head-on, so we can only hide and adapt to the situation. Following the direction in which Princess Zhanglu had fled, Wu Qi gradually found that more and more itinerant immortals, dressed in strange outfits, were gathering in this direction. The wanted document of Myriad Immortal Alliance described in detail the cause and effect of the conflict between Li Qinghua and Princess Zhanglu, as well as the location of the conflict. The itinerant immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance were not stupid. They had all rushed to the vicinity of the Dark Valley Immortal Pass, following the route Princess Zhanglu had taken when she fled. Wu Qi gave Su Qin a glare, grabbed Yan Bugui, and cried out, "Did you bring a special communication talisman when you came out?" Stomping his feet, Su Qin gnashed his teeth and said, "Bugui, we can't let this fellow look down on us. How dare he say that my cultivation base is not strong enough, and does not allow me to go rescue Princess Zhanglu. While he is going to rescue her, we will stay here and figure out how to occupy more territory. Now that Feng Lingling has fallen from power, Zhong province is in chaos. We will be fools if we don't seize the opportunity to reap more benefits." Yan Bugui, who was laughing and chatting with Su Qin, suddenly trembled, and nearly jumped to his feet to give Wu Qi a punch. Fortunately, his reaction was very fast. With just a glance, he saw Wu Qi's face clearly, and asked hastily, "Why are you in such a hurry? Is there something urgent?" Su Qin's face was extremely unsightly. In a hurry, he taught Wu Qi the incantation to control the talisman. After that, Wu Qi spun and was about to leave. Su Qin pondered for a brief moment, then grabbed Wu Qi and said, "Do you want me to go with you? Do you have the confidence to deceive those almighty experts of Myriad Immortal Alliance, and use the art of divination to locate Zhanglu and the others? I'm cultivating the 7 luminaries star-fixing technique, which allows me to conceal the fate and fortune of others with the power of stars." In just a flash, the fiend cloud vanished in the sky. In the blink of an eye, Wu Qi had crossed the millions of miles of void between Anyi County and Anlu County, and was now hovering above Anyi City. On a small flying ship patrolling at the border of the two counties, a few captains of Anyi County saw the fiend cloud that Wu Qi had transformed into. However, the nervous captains of Anyi County paid no attention to Wu Qi, pretending that they did not see him. Yan Bugui was taken aback. Su Qin had already pulled out a jade talisman carved from black jade from under his sleeve. Frowning, he said, "This is a signaling talisman personally made by Mr. Mod. As long as you are from Great Yen, you can use a specific incantation to contact all your companions within the range of a heavenly realm." What do you want this for?" On a cloud in front of him, an immortal had set up a large altar, and was calculating the location of Princess Zhanglu with a dozen of his fellows with a large-scale art of divination. Wu Qi's heart was filled with a poisonous flame. He threw his head back and gave a shrill howl, then suddenly transformed into a gale and rushed toward the cloud with a mighty gust of wind. Su Qin's old face suddenly twitched, and he said in horror, "This kid, he can actually use the star escape technique? What a bastard! It took me 300 years of painstaking cultivation to be able to transform my body into starlight in broad daylight. How can he have such an absurd perception?" Nearby, some people of Great Yen Dynasty had received the message from Wu Qi. The gale was a divine beast that could command all storms between heaven and earth. Recently, Wu Qi had devoured the understanding of the law of storm from 7 gods of wind. So, when he summoned the gale, the area within 1,000 miles was immediately filled with dark winds, and any ordinary heaven immortals who were sucked into the gale would be torn to shreds immediately. As he had to digest Mu Bai's enormous divine energy, in just a few days, Wu Qi did not have the time to craft a few handy weapons for himself. So far, he was still clean, and apart from an ordinary storage ring that he robbed, he had nothing else. If he were to bump into some formidable immortals from Myriad Immortal Alliance who were hunting for Princess Xianglu, Wu Qi would have to fight them empty-handed. That would be a great loss for him. Wu Qi even saw some immortals who were proficient in the art of divination hovering above the cloud, holding some divination tools such as tortoiseshell, trying to predict the whereabouts of Princess Xianglu and her companions. However, as an innate deity, Princess Xiangli's aura was in harmony with heaven and earth, so it was not easy to predict her whereabouts. But, Wu Qi also knew that except for Princess Xianglu, it was very easy to predict the whereabouts of the people around her. After following the trail for 1.5 months, the black jade talisman in Wu Qi's hands suddenly burst into a bright light. Burning with anxiety, Wu Qi used the power of the stars to travel in the direction of a dozen provinces in a flash, far away from the area that might be affected by the chaotic Zhong province. Only then did he enter the capital of a province, and with the help of a teleportation array, he hurried to the place where Princess Xianglu and Li Qinghua met. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful beyond words. Wu Qi nodded inwardly. The 7 luminary star fixing technique was much faster than the geocentric magnetic force he robbed from Zhang Yi. However, it also consumed a lot of energy. In just a blink of an eye, he had consumed half of the energy in his body. No wonder he never used the escape technique that fused with the power of the stars to travel in the sky. It was not that he did not know about it, but that it consumed too much energy, and he did not have the energy to use it at the moment. Through the teleportation array, Wu Qi came straight to the Dark Valley Immortal Pass. Immediately, he bribed an immortal official of the Celestial Court with a large sum of money, asking him which direction Princess Xianglu had fled to when she fought with Li Qinghua. After getting the general direction, Wu Qi immediately rode a beam of starlight and chased after the direction Princess Xianglu had fled to. He had just finished his inspection tour with a number of elites of scouting office, and had returned to Anhui City to rest. Taking advantage of his seniority, he said, "What urgent matter can there be? Feng Lingling and his entire family are missing, and Zhong province is in chaos. It is the best time for us to expand our power. What urgent matter can there be?" The place where Princess Xianglu landed on Panga continent was the Dark Valley Immortal Pass, an independent immortal pass located at the junction of 3 nearby provinces. It was a gathering place for itinerant cultivators from several hundred nearby provinces, and its status was comparable to the Qing Su Immortal Pass near Zhong province. It was an immortal market where itinerant cultivators traded various spirit herbs and minerals, and was also one of the passageways for itinerant cultivators to obtain an official visa from Diyu and travel to outer heavenly realms. Wu Qi transformed into a beam of starlight and flew at high speed in the sky, 10,000 miles above the ground. All his mind and spirit were fused into the countless mysteries of the 7 luminary star fixing technique. With his innate chaotic divine soul's incredible ability, he almost instantly grasped the essence of the 7 luminary star fixing art. He turned into a beam of starlight and vaguely sensed that the stars in the sky that had existed since the ancient times had a tremendous gravitational force on his body. He grabbed the jade slip and crushed it in his palm, using his enormous divine will to brand all the techniques of the 7 luminary star fixing technique into his chaotic divine soul. After that, Wu Qi laughed and bowed to Su Qin. Then, his body abruptly disintegrated into countless silvery specks of starlight, which drifted away into nothingness along with a graceful immortal tune. With his eyes shot with blood, Wu Qi stirred up a vast black storm and smashed the altar to pieces. A dozen heaven immortals with cultivation bases of around 27th or 28th tier were torn into countless pieces by his wind blades before they could even let out a miserable howl. A chaotic aura rushed out, devouring and absorbing the enormous immortal energy and blood essence in these heaven immortals, turning them into Wu Qi's. While fleeing, Wu Qi cursed the ancestors of some people furiously. Su Qin, Yen Bugue, and a few nearby elites of scouting office leaped to their feet and bellowed at the same time, "Who dares to do this?" Chapter 562. Amidst the vast mountains, there was a wonderful wetland. The wetland had a circumference of more than 100,000 miles. At its center was a deep pool, surrounded by smaller pools and ponds, and in the middle were countless streams that connected these pools and ponds together. The wetland was rich in water and grass, with countless spirit herbs that liked dampness, snakes, and crocodiles growing in it. Poisonous insects were wriggling all over the ground, and many spirit beasts were roaming about as well. It was a remote place, located between several large provinces in Diyu, where miasma could easily accumulate. Because of the dense water vapor, it was easy to accumulate miasma, so very few people came here. Although there were a few small spirit veins flowing underground, the natural energy was so thin that no itinerant cultivator or immortal was willing to come here and open up a cave abode. Therefore, since ancient times, this puddle of water and wetland had become a small, sealed world. Gradually, a group of intelligent monsters had gathered here. At the bottom of the deep pool in the middle of the wetland, in front of a crude palace stood a memorial arch. On top of it hung a crystal plaque. It was unknown who had written the words Qianzhang Lake Dragon King Mansion in handwriting that looked like it had been scratched by a chicken's claw. A few crooked-looking aquatic creatures, who couldn't even tell what they were, had been walking around the archway proudly with long spears in their hands. These small demons were probably at the level of Jean Dan, and had only half of their human form transformation. They roughly looked like human beings, but if one were to look closely, one would find that they still looked like demons with crooked heads. In the second courtyard of the palace, which only had 2 courtyards in total, which covered less than 1 acre of land, a short old man, who had a single-horned flood dragon head on his head, had already transformed into a human shape, but his skin was still thickly covered with black fish scales. He was carefully carrying a bowl of sticky, cyan liquid into the main room of the second courtyard. Princess Zhanglu was sitting cross-legged on a jade bed, with dark smoke rising from the top of her head. She was surrounded by a 5-colored divine light from time to time, but there was a faint black mist in the light. The mystic arts and divine abilities of ancient gods were all powerful and could kill people without them noticing. But, each of them had a very strong side effect. If one was not strong enough to activate a certain divine art and used it rashly, one would suffer a great backlash just like Princess Zhanglu. If Princess Zhanglu had not cultivated an innate body and formed an innate divine soul, her meridians would have been broken and she would have died if she had rashly used a powerful divine art. Fortunately, her foundation was very strong. Although her vitality was injured, it did not shake her foundation, and she was still able to stabilize her injury. Lord Xiansheng and the others stood in front of the jade bed, looking worriedly at Princess Zhanglu, who was shrouded in a divine light. Gold Horn and Silver Horn lay feebly on the ground, cursing the thighs of all 36 generations of Li Qinghua's ancestors. The brothers were muttering and swearing that as long as they were given a chance, they would eat the thighs of all the ancestors of Li Qinghua. The dragon-headed old man carefully carried the bowl of medicinal liquid into the room. He bowed respectfully to Lord Xiansheng and said, "My lord, I've collected 3,000 frigid water green spirit herbs and boiled them into a bowl of medicinal liquid. It is the best medicine to replenish the vitality of a woman. This fairy ant seems to have lost some of her origin energy. Drinking this green spirit grass soup should be of some help." Lord Xiansheng nodded and looked at Princess Zhanglu. Princess Zhanglu opened her eyes slightly, nodded, and said with a smile, "Is it really frigid water green spirit herbs? How did you find 3,000 frigid water green spirit herbs? Thank you for your kindness. After we escape from this calamity, we'll definitely help you cultivate the body of a true dragon." The old man opened his mouth and inhaled, turning the bowl of medicinal liquid into a thin line and plunging into Princess Zhanglu's mouth. A refreshing fragrance wafted out, and a cloud of green mist visible to the naked eye sprayed out of Princess Zhanglu's hair. Suddenly, a hint of redness returned to Princess Zhanglu's pale face. Nodding cheerfully, Princess Zhanglu smiled at the dragon-headed old man and said, "It works. Thank you, old Dragon King." The dragon-headed old man grinned, shook his head, and said modestly, "Don't mention it. How dare I call myself Dragon King in front of my lord? Hee, it's just a title made up by a bunch of ignorant children. In front of my lord and all the immortals here, I dare not call myself Dragon King." The dragon-headed old man called himself Qianzhang Dragon King, and he was the leader of all the demons in this 100,000 miles wide wetland. His true form was a black silk blood eel, who had gained sentience after absorbing the essence of the stars and the moon, and luckily obtained half of the cultivation technique left behind by the Flood Dragon clan. After tens of thousands of years of arduous cultivation, he finally got rid of his eel's true form and cultivated into the body of a flood dragon. However, his true form was too humble. Although he had cultivated into a flood dragon, he only had the body of a single-horned flood dragon, the lowest among all the flood dragons. Not only did he only have 3 claws, his head only had a single horn, and the dragon scales on his body were not dragon scales, but more like fish scales. To be precise, Qianzhang Dragon King was a product between a big fish and a flood dragon, and he was far from being a real dragon. A few days ago, Lord Xiansheng had fled to this place with Princess Zhanglu and her companions. He had exhausted all his magic power, and Princess Zhanglu was severely wounded by the backlash from the divine magic. It seemed that she would not be able to hold on any longer. Qianzhang Dragon King, who was stirring up trouble on the surface of the water with a group of little demons, was shocked when he saw Lord Xiansheng. Without hesitation, he welcomed Lord Xiansheng and his companions into his dragon palace, treating them as distinguished guests. Fortunately, they had Qianzhang Dragon King as their temporary residence, and he had ordered over 1,000 little demons to gather various spirit herbs and brew a concoction for Princess Zhanglu to replenish her energy. With that, Lord Xiansheng and his companions were able to recover their magic power, and Princess Zhanglu was able to stabilize her injuries. Taking a deep breath, Princess Zhanglu's body shone with a 5-colored divine light as she said in a deep voice, "Are all the formations deployed outside the dragon palace ready?" Catfish nodded innocently and said with a chuckle, "How could anyone find us when we have fled so far? The formations have been deployed, but in my opinion, they are all in vain. I don't believe that anyone can chase us so far. Who can find us here? Even ghosts can kill people in such a remote place during the day." Princess Zhanglu frowned and said nothing, while Lord Xiansheng kept shaking his head. "It's better to be cautious," said Lord Xiansheng in a deep voice. According to the legends passed down by the ancestors of Longyuan River, those almighty experts have the ability to see through the secrets of heaven. Even if they live above the stars, with just a glance, they can see every grain of sand and every movement of every ant in the universe. It is difficult for us to know all the divine abilities and mystic arts they possess. If the myriad immortal alliance has sent powerful immortals to hunt us down, they might be able to find us here. Princess Zhanglu nodded slowly. She told everyone to guard the formations carefully, and not to take any chances. She was too weak to move now, and could only recuperate in Qianzhang Dragon King's Dragon Palace. If the enemy came to visit, it would be really bad. Goldhorn and Silverhorn exchanged a glance, then they coiled up at the same time and cursed Li Qinghua's future relatives and clan members for the next 36 generations. The brothers swore that when they found a chance in the future, they would make Li Qinghua give birth to more grandchildren, and then they would eat his offspring to vent their anger of being hunted down today. At the thought of Li Qinghua's words, the brothers felt a chill running down their spines, as if they were going to use the ointment extracted from their internal organs to concoct medicine. In the future, we'll raise Li Qinghua as a human. Since he wants to use our internal organs to concoct medicine, we'll raise him like a pig, and eat his children and grandchildren as desserts. Goldhorn and Silverhorn were not kind people, so they quickly came up with a revenge method that would make ordinary people's hair stand on end. While they were talking, the sky above the Dragon Palace suddenly glowed with a bright red light. 7 middle-aged men in Daoist robes hovered over the deep pool on clouds. One of them was holding a red crystal mirror the size of a palm, which emitted a beam of red light and sealed the whole pool. The man murmured a few incantations, bit his finger, and drew a line across the surface of the mirror. Immediately, the red light became extremely hot, and a large sheet of flame flowed along it and burned into the pool. The crystal mirror was obviously an extraordinary treasure, and its power was a little frightening. Immediately, water vapor rose from the surface of the pool, and a large number of bubbles rose to the surface. From the surface to the depth of 10 miles, the pool, which was 1,000 miles in diameter, was burned by the red light. Fortunately, the depth of this pool was astonishing. Although the water 10 miles above the pool was boiling, the water below was not affected at all. However, a dozen little demons who were keeping watch on the surface of the water were almost cooked. Carrying red shells on their backs, they fled back to the dragon palace, crying and screaming, and then crashed into the courtyard on the second floor. A little demon, who looked like a crayfish but had black and white patterns all over his body, cried out, "Grandpa Dragon King, there are 7 evil Taoists setting fire to our territory. The water in the pool is boiling for 10 miles, and if it continues to burn, our Qianzhang Lake will become a bowl of fish soup." Princess Zhongli's face flickered slightly. She nodded to Lord Xiansheng and said, "Brother Xiansheng, please go up and have a look. If you can fight the enemy, kill them. If not, activate the formation, and we'll think of another way." Lord Xiansheng answered. He rolled up his sleeves and stormed out of the door, heading straight for the surface of the water. Gold Horn and Silver Horn hurried after him. Their eyes gleamed with a fierce gleam, and saliva dripped from the corners of their mouths as they rushed toward the surface of the water with a murderous look in their eyes. The closer they got to the surface of the water, the hotter the water became. Originally, the surface of the water was only about 10 miles above the surface, but now, it had reached 20 miles, and the boiling water was spreading to the bottom. It wouldn't be long before all the water in the 1,000-zhang pool was boiled. Just as that small demon had said, it would be a big bowl of fish soup. Lord Xiansheng brought Gold Horn and Silver Horn to the surface of the water. As he passed through the boiling layer, even with his cultivation base and the body of a true dragon, he felt a burning pain all over his body, and blisters broke out on his skin. He could not help but cry out in horror, "Good Taoist! What kind of vicious magical treasure is this? How could it burn my body of a true dragon like this?" Gold Horn and Silver Horn did not care about that. They were not afraid of the high temperature or the cold. When they heard Lord Xiansheng say that the boiling water made him feel uncomfortable, one of them opened his mouth and the other opened his mouth to breathe. The hot air in the boiling water was sucked clean, and then a great plume of cold air gushed out, freezing the surface of Qianzhang Lake 1,000 miles in circumference into a block of Xianbing. The 7 Taoists in the sky cried out in unison, "We've found the place. They are really hiding here." Whistling noises could be heard coming from all directions as nearly 100 sword beams approached at top speed, and more than 100 Taoists surrounded Qianzhang Lake. Chapter 563. Amidst a series of cracking noises, Qianzhang Lake was frozen into a block of dark blue Xianbing. A white, misty cold air towered into the sky. When the red light emitted from the crystal mirror in the middle-aged Taoist's hand collided with the cold air, it was as if countless bombs had exploded in midair. The dull, muffled booms of explosions shook the wetland near Qianzhang Lake, causing countless water pillars that were over 1,000 feet tall to rise into the air, while muddy water sprayed into the sky. Hiding in the Xianbing, Lord Xiansheng, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn stared through the translucent ice at the group of Taoists who had gathered in the sky. A little demon crab was ordered by Qianzhang Dragon King to follow them, carefully hiding next to Lord Xiansheng. Lord Xiansheng gave the little demon a look and pointed out a finger. A crack appeared on the Xianbing, and he kicked the little demon out, then transmitted a few words to him through voice transmission. The crab spirit, who was carrying a pair of dark iron hammers, straightened his little head, rolled his 2 big eyeballs in his eye sockets, pointed at those priests in the sky and yelled harshly, "You bunch of stupid Taoists, why did you come here? Do you know that this is the territory of Qianzhang Dragon King? Touch your heads. Your lives are in the balance of a single breath." The Taoists burst into laughter. A white-bearded Taoist clad in a golden Taoist robe stepped on a cloud and came above the little crab demon. He bowed his head and said with a smile, "Qianzhang Dragon King. What a famous demon. Hee, cut the crap. Hand over the group of men and women, as well as the 2 dragon pythons of fire and ice, and we won't go too far, nor will we encroach on your great foundation." The Taoists burst into laughter again. The white-bearded Taoist stroked his beard and said with a smile, "I'm Taoist Ling of Mount Zia, and they are all my disciples. The lineage of Purple Nightmare Mountain is proficient in the art of divination with the stars. It took me more than a month of hard work before I managed to deduce that this group of men and women are hiding in this pool. Don't try to beat around the bush. Hurry up and hand them over. Otherwise, all of you fiendish demons will be reduced to dust with a thunderous strike." The Taoist holding the crystal mirror suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. He put down the crystal mirror, cupped his fists, and said to Taoist Ling, "Master, my power has been exhausted. The demons in the water are very powerful, and the cold air is really hard to resist." As the red light emitted by the crystal mirror vanished, Gold Horn and Silver Horn's cold air immediately gained the upper hand. A large sheet of cold air quickly spread around Xianzhang Lake, and before long, the nearby puddles and wetlands were covered with a layer of white frost. Some giant pythons, crocodiles, and other aquatic creatures hurriedly fled in all directions. Water plants were wriggling everywhere. It was unknown how many of them had escaped from the Thousand Zhang Lake. The little crab demon rolled his eyes. After receiving Lord Xianqing's order, he bared his teeth and said, "We don't have any men or women here. Those dragon pythons of fire and ice, we." Taoist Ling's face darkened. He pointed a finger at the little crab demon and snapped, "Why are you still giving me false excuses at a time like this? Do you really think I have a good temper?" As he pointed his finger out, a sword cry rang out. 3 long blue swords flew out of the scabbards on his back, lined up in a straight line, and thrust towards the crab spirit's head, leaving 3 beams of sword light that were over 10 feet long. Although they were still about 100 feet away from him, the little crab demon was so frightened that he could not move. He stared blankly at the falling swords, then suddenly let out a strange howl. Holding his head with both hands, he plunged into the crack of the Xian Bing that had just opened up. But, no matter how fast he was, he could never be faster than the flying swords. Just as he turned around, the 3 swords had arrived above his head. 3 loud booms rang out in a row, and Lord Xianqing's body swayed as he rushed out of the Xian Bing. His head had transformed into a huge dragon head, and his body had abruptly grown to about 30 feet tall. Glinting dragon scales covered his body, making him look like a suit of armor. With both fists wrapped in a strong dragon aura, Lord Xianqing threw out 3 punches in a row, knocking the 3 swords far away. Taoist Ling's body swayed as the swords were thrown out by Lord Xianqing. His immortal soul was shaken as well, and he nearly coughed out a mouthful of blood. Looking at Lord Xianqing, he did not panic, but instead cried out in delight, "Wonderful! Aren't you one of the true image catalog that young master is offering for? Ha, a heavenly dragon is not enough to scare me. My disciples, let's attack together." More than 100 swords whistled out of the hands of those Taoists, turning into a hazy mist as they thrust toward Lord Xianqing. There were also a dozen powerful magical treasures that glowed brilliantly, shooting sparks and thunderbolts as they swarmed toward Lord Xianqing. Lord Xianqing gave a cold snort. With a sway of his body, a great wave of water suddenly rushed out from the bottom of Qianzhang Lake, blotting out the sky and turning into a whirlpool that was a few miles thick and hundreds of miles wide, spinning rapidly over his head. Lord Xianqing raised both hands up high and exercised the innate divine ability of dragons. Amidst thunderous roars, the water churned and suddenly sprayed out hundreds of water columns that were as thick as water tanks and looked like flood dragons, greeting the swords and magical treasures of those Taoists. Loud booms kept ringing out as one water column after another disintegrated, but the hundreds of swords were also pushed up into the sky by the water droplets. The flames and thunderbolts unleashed by over a dozen powerful magical treasures struck the rapidly spinning whirlpool. The huge whirlpool absorbed the attacks unleashed by these magical treasures, transforming them into dazzling flashes in the middle of the green whirlpool. However, not a single attack could break through the defense of the whirlpool. Taoist Ling was struck dumb. Although Mount Zia, the sect he founded on Panga continent, was famous for its divination technique, the cultivation base of its disciples was also very impressive. Apart from himself, who was a 34th tier heaven immortal. There were 3 36th tier heaven immortals among his disciples. Among the other disciples present, there were as many as 30 nascent divinity cultivators, and the rest were all nascent soul cultivators. How could 100 of them fail to take down Lord Xiansheng? Isn't this a little too ridiculous? Even though Mount Xia was not known for its Tao, magic, and divine abilities, its cultivation base was still there. How could this Lord Xiansheng be so fierce? Flustered and exasperated, Daoist Ling summoned back the 3 sword beams that were knocked away. Just as he was about to attack Lord Xiansheng himself, Goldhorn and Silverhorn suddenly poked their heads out of the Xian Bing. The brothers let out a sharp and violent hiss, then opened their mouths and shot out 2 strong beams of red and white light, each as thick as a water tank, which transformed into a red and white spiral beam that swept across the void. The cultivators of Mount Xia were caught off guard. The beam of red and white light smashed into their bodies, shattering the defensive magical treasures of over 80 cultivators on the spot. Their bodies turned red at first as they were almost cooked, and then a cold air suddenly froze them, shattering both their fleshly bodies and their nascent divinities at the same time. Miserable howls kept ringing out. The joint attack of Goldhorn and Silverhorn could shatter even Daoist Mo Wan's defensive immortal item, let alone these inferior cultivators of Mount Xia. Daoist Ling was so angry that he coughed up a mouthful of blood. Many years ago, he had a fortuitous encounter, and it took him several periods to attain his current cultivation base. It took him a lot of effort to establish Mount Xia on Panga continent, and under the violent suppression of the officials of Diyu, he finally managed to establish a sect and had over 100 disciples. With just one strike, Goldhorn and Silverhorn had killed about 80% of his disciples. Daoist Ling even had the thought of cutting his own throat to kill himself. Trembling all over, he roared furiously and pressed both palms down. 3 blue sword beams shot whistling out, stabbing toward Lord Xiansheng, Goldhorn, and Silverhorn respectively. Daoist Ling even coughed out 3 mouthfuls of blood in a row, causing the 3 sword beams to grow hundreds of feet taller and plunge down like a waterfall. Their power was at least 100 times stronger than when he attacked the little crab demon with his swords just now. Lord Xiansheng's face darkened. Suddenly, a vast amount of mist sprayed out of his body, amidst which numerous bolts of lightning could be seen wheeling and tangling with each other. Amidst the deafening thunderclaps, the bolts of lightning shot straight toward the oncoming lightning bolts. As Lord Xiansheng's coiling dragon halberd had been destroyed in the previous battle, he could only rely on his divine abilities and magic power to fight against Daoist Ling now. Fortunately, Goldhorn and Silverhorn were still around. Before the thunderbolts unleashed by Lord Xiansheng could touch Daoist Ling's sword beams, Goldhorn had already opened his mouth and spat out a sheet of flame. The 3 sword beams trembled abruptly, turning from a cold blue glow to a bright red glow with a high temperature. Then, Silverhorn sprayed out a glinting stream of cold air. The 3 red beams shook, and a series of cracking noises rang out as they shattered into pieces on the spot. Daoist Ling coughed out another mouthful of blood as he snapped, "My spirit artifact." Lord Xiansheng gave him a glare and snapped, "Don't you feel ashamed that you, a heaven immortal, are still using a spirit artifact?" Daoist Ling was stunned and blinked his eyes, unable to come to his senses for a long while after being scolded by Lord Xiansheng. Goldhorn and Silverhorn sneered, "I can tell this old Daoist is not a rich man. He has already cultivated to the realm of heaven immortal, but he is still using a spirit artifact. Alas, why is he so poor?" Gritting his teeth, Daoist Ling was about to refute Goldhorn and Silverhorn when suddenly, a dark cloud came rushing over from the distant horizon. When it was still tens of miles away from Daoist Ling, a deep, hoarse voice was heard coming from afar, "Fellow Daoist Ling, thank you for leading the way. The divination technique of Mount Xia is really amazing. Hee, how could it be so easy for me to find this group of people if I were to come here myself?" With a flash, the dark cloud came in front of Daoist Ling. With a cracking sound, a dark fiend claw reached out from it, grabbed Daoist Ling's head, and crushed half of his body to pieces. Daoist Ling howled miserably. As his immortal soul turned into a beam of golden light and was about to flee, the fiend Claw reached out and easily grabbed his immortal soul, then crushed it to pieces. All the Taoists of Mount Xia roared furiously in unison. Just as they were about to attack the dark cloud, it suddenly spread out and enveloped all the Taoists of Mount Xia. An unpleasant gnawing sound rang out, accompanied by shrill howls. Not long after, the dark clouds converged inward, and all the Taoists of Mount Xia disappeared without a trace, leaving only an extremely pungent smell of blood in the air. "Who are you?" Lord Xiansheng cried out in alarm. "I'm Patriarch Ji Jin, an itinerant immortal from Wandering Immortal Hall of Myriad Immortal Alliance," the dark cloud said with a deep laugh. "Ha ha ha, don't you know that Myriad Immortal Alliance has issued a wanted order for you?" The dark cloud receded, revealing a deformed old man with a head as big as a rice bucket and a height of only about 3 feet. Chapter 564. Catfish howled in pain. She threw away the hammer, spun, and fled, transforming back into her true form and diving back into Qianzhang Lake. Rubbing his palms together, Patriarch Ji Jin looked up at the sky and said in a deep voice, "Cut the crap. Either surrender, or I'll capture you. Hee hee, you are delicious steamed buns. As far as I know, many old fogies from Wandering Immortal Hall have come out of seclusion just to capture you alive in exchange for the 3 conditions promised by the Council of Elders. TSK, I can't let you fall into their hands." He quickly moved his eyes away from Lord Xiansheng and focused all his attention on Goldhorn and Silverhorn. Grinning, Patriarch Ji Jin licked his lips greedily and said, "Dragon pythons of fire and ice, hand over your internal organs, and I'll take you to receive the reward." TSK, the 3 conditions jointly promised by the Council of Elders of Myriad Immortal Alliance. "Patriarch, you have a chance to become a gold immortal." Lord Xiansheng was horrified. Without hesitation, he grabbed Goldhorn and Silverhorn's tails and dived into Qianzhang Lake with the 2 great snakes. Moving quickly, Lord Xiansheng dragged the brothers into Qianzhang Lake. But Goldhorn and Silverhorn had no strength left, and they could not breathe out cold air to freeze the lake. Patriarch Ji Mu laughed complacently. With a shake of his banner, thousands of green specks of light shot out like a meteor shower and plunged into Qianzhang Pool like thousands of firefly-like green specks. A few hissing noises rang out as the green specks crashed into the whirlpool and were swallowed by it. Then, a deafening explosion rang out as the green specks exploded violently. The whirlpool under Lord Xiansheng's control shattered abruptly, and a great torrent poured down from the sky, shattering the frozen Xian Bing above Qianzhang Lake. Dozens of little demons who were hiding under the Xian Bing and watching the battle screamed in fear, then turned and dived into the depths of the lake. Although they ran fast, the impact of the torrent still made them bleed from their mouths and noses, and the shells of some of them were even shattered. The Black Goat Mountain's 3 heretical path laughed weirdly and said in unison, "The 3 conditions promised by the Council of Elders, we are also itching to do it. As long as the 3 of us capture these people, there's hope for us to become golden immortals. Old ancestor Ji Min, if you know what's good for you, get lost." Muffled explosions kept ringing as the foot-thick white bone shields shattered one after another. However, each of the shattered white bone shields weakened the light beams shot out by Goldhorn and Silverhorn a little bit. When the dozens of bone shields were completely shattered, the light pillars shot out by Goldhorn and Silverhorn were completely neutralized, turning into specks of light that drifted in the air. While Patriarch Ji Mu was smugly attacking the Qianzhang Lake with thunderbolts, Catfish suddenly transformed into her flood dragon form, leaped out of the lake, and gave him a vicious slap with her huge tail. Patriarch Ji Mu was so complacent that he had completely neglected to protect himself. In the face of Catfish's sudden attack, he just instinctively thrust the banner in his hand toward her tail. Goldhorn and Silverhorn were infuriated. They joined their bodies together and opened their mouths, shooting out 2 beams of strong light, one red and one white, toward Patriarch Ji Mu. Patriarch Ji Mu gave a strange laugh. With a wave of his hand, a long banner made of human skin and tendons appeared out of thin air in his hand. With a wave of the long streamer, a large sheet of dark cloud rose from the ground, amidst which, several dozens of white bone shields whizzed out, bringing with them an immense evil energy. One after another, they blocked the light beams shot out by Gold Horn and Silver Horn. While letting out an unpleasant laugh, Patriarch Ji Mu tilted his head and studied Lord Xiansheng, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn. Suddenly, a strange laugh rang out as three old men in black robes, who looked identical and looked like the reincarnation of goats, came shooting over from a distance, treading on dark clouds. One of them waved his hand, and the green sword beam that had wounded Catfish in a sneak attack flew back to him and fell into his palm. Gold Horn and Silver Horn inhaled slowly as their bodies grew larger, and the wings on their backs grew hundreds of feet long. The brothers stared at Patriarch Ji Mu with a fierce gleam in their eyes, and saliva was slowly dripping from the corners of their mouths. They did not have any hatred for Patriarch Ji Mu at the moment, but their hearts were dominated by an endless appetite. All they wanted to do was to devour the old fiend. Lord Xiansheng's body trembled, and blood oozed out of his 7 orifices at the same time. The Yin thunderbolt unleashed by Patriarch Ji Mu had not only shattered the whirlpool he controlled, but also destroyed a wisp of his divine sense hidden in it. Lord Xiansheng's soul was severely wounded, and the light on his scales had dimmed. Patriarch Ji Mu laughed complacently. He waved the streamer and cried out, "Surrender now. What are you waiting for?" Laughing triumphantly, Catfish transformed back into her human form, pulled out her hammer, and was about to attack Patriarch Ji Mu. Suddenly, a green sword beam came shooting over from the side. Before Catfish could see where it came from, it had already pierced through her lower abdomen. Although the streamer was mysterious and powerful, it was not good at defense. Catfish swung her tail with all her strength, and the brute force was strong enough to send several mountains flying. As Catfish's tail swept past, Patriarch Ji Mu's streamer broke into 7 or 8 pieces. Patriarch Ji Mu let out a heart-wrenching howl as his short body was sent flying away by Catfish's tail. Lord Xiansheng sighed faintly. Looking at Patriarch Ji Mu, he said indifferently, "There's no such good thing in the world. Do you want us to surrender now?" "Impossible. If you want our lives, you'll have to pay with yours." The dragon clan's mastery over water had reached the acme of perfection, and the massive clump of water was compressed to a size of 100 zhang. The quality of the water vortex was 100 times denser than a steel ingot, and the pressure exerted by the spinning water vortex was terrifyingly great. Even an ordinary heavenly immortal would have their immortal body shredded to pieces if they were to get sucked into the water vortex. Lord Xiansheng waved both hands, and the blue-green vortex flew whistling out to meet the 10 green dots. All the immortals were allies of Myriad Immortal Alliance, and they had some friendship with each other. But in the face of the generous offer offered by the Council of Elders of Divine Hall, they could not care less, and were about to fall out and fight for the ownership of Princess Zhang Lu and her companions. Patriarch Ji Mu cursed angrily. He transformed into a dark cloud and rushed back, pointing a finger at the 3 black-robed old men as he said, "How dare you steal my business, 3 evils of Black Goat Mountain." These people were discovered by Patriarch Ji Mu. "Don't you dare to take advantage of me." Patriarch Ji Mu shook his head mockingly, then sighed and said, "I'm a 24th tier heaven immortal. How can I risk my life to fight with you? You guys don't have that qualification. It's impossible to exchange a life for a life with this old ancestor." Before his voice faded away, from afar, another group of clear light wrapped in clouds flew over at high speed. Along with a beautiful melody, 7 Taoist priests, who looked like immortals, were riding on white cranes, deer, cyan wands, bulls, and other immortal beasts, slowly trod on the clear light and white clouds towards Ji Hao. The Taoist in the middle smiled and said, "The 3 evils are right. These 3 offers are too tempting, and we've come here uninvited. These people belong to the 7 saints of Nua Xian Island, and no one can take them away." A dead silence fell over Qianzhang Lake, and even the little bugs in the puddles dared not make a sound. Lord Xiansheng, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn cried out at the same time. Stars flashed before their eyes, and they felt as if their souls were about to fly out of their bodies. Their strength suddenly vanished, and their bodies became limp and sore. Gold Horn and Silver Horn, in particular, had no idea what kind of fiend Patriarch Ji-Mu's streamer was, but it had a strong restraining effect on them. The two great serpents fell limply on the surface of the lake, unable to move for a moment. In the blink of an eye, when the 7 sages of Nushin Island had just arrived, there were at least 10 groups of immortals, either alone or in groups of 3 to 5, rushing over to their side. These immortals kept saying that Princess Zhanglu and her companions were theirs, and no one could take them away from them. As he spoke, Patriarch Ji-Mu waved his hands, and 10 green lights shot out like fireflies, shooting toward Lord Xiansheng with a harsh ghost howl. Grinning coldly, Lord Xiansheng raised both hands, and the hundreds of miles wide whirlpool over his head began to roll rapidly. Amidst a deafening rumble of thunder, the whirlpool shrank rapidly, from hundreds of miles wide to 1,000 feet in size. Patriarch Ji-Mu let out a strange, complacent laugh. Run? Where are you going? Hee, this 10,000-year-old Realgar pearl of mine is a treasure I obtained with great difficulty in those years, and it's just the perfect weapon to restrain you two great serpents. With a wave of his hand, a golden pearl the size of a human head flew out of his palm, emanating a vast yellow light and a boundless yellow mist that enveloped the entire lake. Dragging Gold Horn and Silver Horn, Lord Xiansheng sank into the depths of the lake. Gritting his teeth, he glanced over his shoulder at the arrogant and complacent Patriarch Ji-Mu. Just then, a huge shadow flashed under the lake. Catfish, who had returned to her true form, quietly rushed up from the depths of the lake and brushed past Lord Xiansheng. The green sword beam was attached with an extremely vicious corrosive force. The wound it caused when it pierced through Catfish's lower abdomen was very small, but in the blink of an eye, it had corroded a bowl-sized hole in her abdomen. Amidst the sizzling sound of flesh and blood being corroded, pus and blood kept gushing out of the wound as it grew larger and larger. Gold Horn and Silver Horn grunted. Enveloped by the yellow light and yellow mist, they felt their muscles and bones go limp and weak, and they had no strength left. The brothers cried out, "A 10,000-year-old Realgar pearl? There's no justice in this world. Such a vicious thing shouldn't exist in this world." Muffled explosions rang out one after another, and the lake water rose tens of miles high. Thunderbolts exploded, while green phosphorescent flames attached to the surface of the lake burned rapidly. Before long, the water of Qianzhang Lake had receded more than 30 miles deep. As Patriarch Ji-Mu continued to sprinkle out large sheets of thunderbolts, the water of the lake was receding rapidly. Before long, the Dragon Palace of Qianzhang Dragon King would emerge from the water. Among these immortals, the weakest had the overall strength of a 30th tier heaven immortal, while the strongest had the cultivation base of a 20th tier heaven immortal. Any one of them was an expert that Princess Zhanglu and the others could not defeat. Chapter 565. More than 200 heaven immortals, who belonged to over 60 small groups, had gathered above Qianzhang Lake. These heaven immortals were the allies of Myriad Immortal Alliance. Among them were heaven immortals from outer heavenly realms, and some were born and raised on Pangu continent. Clutching the wound on her lower abdomen, Catfish silently exercised a mystic technique to stabilize her condition, and at the same time, treated the wound with the herbs Qianzhang Dragon King had collected. She stared at the heaven immortals above the lake and suddenly sighed faintly, "We are in big trouble. I can't eat them this time, and I might be eaten by them." Princess Zhanglu gathered her spirit and came to her side, frowning as she looked at the heaven immortals in the sky and shook her head. In just over a month, more than 200 heaven immortals had found Qianzhang Lake and accurately captured the traces of Princess Zhanglu and her companions. The latent power of Myriad Immortal Alliance on Pangu continent could only be described as terrifying. These people, whose cultivation was at the level of 20th tier heaven immortal, were just ordinary allies of the wandering immortal hall of the alliance of 10,000 immortals. One could imagine how powerful the alliance of 10,000 immortals was. The heaven immortals were still arguing about who should monopolize the bounty this time. But, with so many heaven immortals gathered together, their overall strength was not much stronger than anyone else. So, after arguing for a full hour, they still could not come to a conclusion. After all, the Empyrean Hall's bounty only had 3 conditions. At most, only 3 people would be able to enjoy the plentiful benefits. The others would not be able to benefit at all. Who would be willing to let go of such a great opportunity? Lord Xiansheng came over with Gold Horn and Silver Horn, who were limp and weak. "Catfish, protect my sister-in-law and run away," he said in a deep voice. "I'll fight them here. No matter what, I'm still the Dragon King conferred by the Celestial Court, so they won't dare to kill me." Lord Xiansheng took out Weiniying Dragon King's seal and waved it in the air, trying to make his words sound more convincing. Princess Zhanglu shook her head and said coldly, "If Wu Qi learns that I left his elder brother and ran away, how am I going to face him in the future?" With a sneer, Princess Zhang Li's eyes turned cold. Gritting her teeth, she said in a low voice, "Li Qinghua, Union of 10,000 Immortals. I'll definitely pay you back 100-fold for today's enmity. No matter what the Union of 10,000 Immortals is, I must kill all the people related to it, slaughter them all." With a wave of her hands, Princess Zhanglu squatted down and pressed her hands heavily on the bottom of the Thousand Zhang Lake. The huge Qianzhang Lake suddenly trembled, and the few small spirit veins that flowed through the Qianzhang Lake shook violently. Once the spirit vein moved, the ground within a radius of 10,000 miles would shake violently. A large number of mountains would suddenly collapse, and the ground would sink hundreds of miles into the ground. Countless cracks would appear on the ground, and a dense earth energy would rise hundreds of miles into the air. The group of immortals hovering over Qianzhang Lake and arguing with each other was shocked. One after another, they flew up into the sky on clouds and stared in astonishment at the quaking ground and mountains, which looked as if the end of the world had come. An enchanting and flirtatious girl in a palace dress suddenly cried out, "What's going on? Why are the spirit veins under the lake disappearing?" The girl was right. Princess Zhanglu was using a forbidden technique from the primordial Tao of divinity to forcibly devour the 7 small spirit veins that flowed under Qianzhang Lake. She forcibly mobilized the energy in the spirit veins and absorbed their source power into her body, catalyzing them into 5-colored divine rays that flowed through her body. Her injuries were healing at an incredible speed, and her magic power was growing at an incredible speed. In just 15 minutes, Princess Zhang Li's cultivation base had reached the realm of 25th tier heaven immortal. The 7 small spirit veins were the so-called small spirit veins on Pangu continent. The energy contained in each of them was at least 10 times more than the strongest spirit vein under Yuanhua Sec's Green Cliff Mountain. After extracting all the energy from the 7 spirit veins and devouring their source power, Princess Zhang Li's cultivation base skyrocketed and her injuries healed at an incredible speed. However, the side effect of such a forbidden technique was that the source of Princess Zhang Li's divine soul was severely damaged. In just 15 minutes, about 50% of Princess Zhang Li's divine soul had been destroyed. Her once bright eyes turned dull and lifeless, and Princess Zhang Li's body trembled violently, with sticky blood dripping down from her hair. When Lord Xiansheng, Catfish Flood Dragon, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn saw Princess Zhang Li's condition, they could not help but gnash their teeth so hard that blood kept oozing out from the corners of their mouths. With a faint smile on her face, Princess Zhang Li said in a low voice, "Don't worry. This is the soul-burning and energy-restoring technique, one of the ancient divine techniques. Although it consumes some of my divine soul, it can elevate my cultivation base to an incredible level for 2 hours. It is the best way to save my life." The sound of meridians breaking was heard coming from inside her body as Princess Zhang Li's cultivation base skyrocketed. As all the energy from the 7 spirit veins was absorbed into her body, Princess Zhang Li temporarily possessed the fearsome overall strength of an 18th tier heaven immortal for 2 hours. The divine energy in her body became extremely violent and powerful. Princess Zhang Li felt that every single strand of her hair was filled with terrible power. She was like a balloon that could explode at any time. The power had reached a point where she would not be satisfied if she did not spit it out. Princess Zhang Li's body trembled as she chuckled and said, "This is the first time I've used this forbidden technique. 7 spirit veins. It's still too much for me. With a wry smile, the silver lotus throne beneath Princess Zhongli's feet suddenly flew out, shrouding her in a five-colored light. With a point of her right hand, the five thunders soul-shattering zither given to her by Wu Qi flew out with a melodious tune. Princess Zhongli held the zither in her arms, stepped on the silver lotus throne, and flew up into the sky. Suddenly, the water in the 10,000 Zhang lake splashed, and Princess Zhongli, clad in a black imperial dress, stepped on the silver lotus throne, and soared up into the sky like a fairy. The underground energy veins had disappeared, and the earth veins near the 10,000 Zhang lake were crumbling. Amidst the crumbling mountains and fissures, Princess Zhongli, who looked so demure with a faint air of a palace, attracted everyone's attention. It was as if the whole world had suddenly fallen silent. Mountains collapsed one after another, and the earth kept crumbling and sinking. But, all the immortals present had their attention on Princess Zhongli. Some immortals with lustful natures even took a deep breath, falling in love with Princess Zhongli's peerless beauty. A handsome immortal with a pair of peach blossom eyes breathed a long sigh and said, "No wonder young master wants to capture this girl alive. She is indeed a peerless beauty. TSK, if I can get close to such a beautiful girl, I will have no regrets in this life." Princess Zhongli narrowed her eyes and gave the handsome immortal a cold smile. Her fingers lightly plucked the strings of the zither, injecting an enormous divine energy into the five thunders soul-shattering zither. A series of deep, muffled booms rang out. Princess Zhongli loosened her fingers, and the strings moved. A sound wave, visible to the naked eyes, rose several thousand feet high like a raging sea wave, whistling towards the handsome immortal. When the five thunders soul-shattering zither rang out, there was no other sound between the heaven and earth. Even the sound of the crumbling mountains was drowned out by the booms of the zither. The handsome immortal was staring greedily at Princess Zhongli's beautiful face. All of a sudden, the zither tune unleashed by the five thunders soul-shattering zither arrived right before his face. His expression flickered. With a wave of his hand, a pink handkerchief flew out of his hand, spraying out countless peach petals to protect his body. The sound of the zither swept across like a storm. The pink handkerchief and countless peach blossom petals were destroyed by the sound of the zither, and the robe on the handsome immortal's body was also destroyed. The immortal was not wounded at all, but his internal organs were shattered by the music, and his immortal soul was turned into nothingness amidst the terrible music. With a flash, Princess Zhongli came next to the immortal, grabbed his neck with one hand, and threw him forcefully into Qianzhang Lake. Gold Horn and Silver Horn opened their mouths and caught the immortal's body. Then, with a shake of their heads, they tore the immortal's body into two pieces and swallowed them. Gold Horn and Silver Horn, who had just been controlled by the 10,000 years Realgar bead and had lost all their strength, suddenly became full of vigor and strength. Princess Zhongli pursed her red lips, proudly raised her chin, and said lightly, "If you want to please myriad immortal union, then be prepared to die. Those who offend me will have their 9 clans exterminated. If I don't destroy your souls and then kill all your clans, how could I be worthy of your pursuit from thousands of miles away?" The divine power in her body had reached the point where she had to vent it out crazily. Princess Zhongli laughed aloud and plucked the strings on the zither again and again. Suddenly, countless thunderclaps rang out in the void, and purple sound waves visible to the naked eyes swept across the void. Accompanied by a dense clap of thunder, the terrible sound waves tore the defensive immortal treasures, immortal swords, and magical treasures of the immortals, and shattered their bodies and immortal souls. Soundwave immortal artifacts were extremely rare, and so were cultivation techniques that could hurt people with sound. Therefore, the immortals did not have a good defense against the zither. Princess Zhongli's cultivation base was now approaching that of an 18th-tier heaven immortal, which made her terrifyingly strong. With just a light flick of her fingers, a loud clap of thunder could be heard. As the immortals' cultivation bases were not as strong as hers, and they did not have a good way to resist the attack of the sound waves, they fell like rain. In just an hour, more than 100 immortals were killed by Princess Zhongli on the spot. Catfish, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn were waiting in Qianzhang Lake with their mouths wide open, devouring all the fallen immortals. Even Lord Xiansheng could not help but be aroused by the innate ferocity in his heart at the sight of the immortals falling like rain. He transformed into a dragon, opened his mouth, and joined in the feast of the immortals' flesh and blood. The immortals' pure flesh and blood, which contained infinite power, were digested and turned into their own magic power. Princess Xianglu continued to play the zither in midair, causing many heaven immortals to flee with their hands over their heads. The sound waves did not have a fixed trajectory, and just followed Princess Xiangli's will. The remaining 100 or so heaven immortals could not resist Princess Xiangli's terrible attack, and gradually, another 70 or 80 were killed by Princess Xiangli's sudden attack. 2 hours later, the enormous divine power in Princess Xiangli's body, which she had obtained with a mystic technique, suddenly disappeared without a trace. Princess Xiangli's face turned pale. Her body swayed a few times, then she abruptly transformed into a beam of 5-colored divine light and flew back into Qianzhang Lake. The remaining 30 or so immortals with the strongest cultivation bases saw the clues. They could tell that Princess Xianglu had used a mystic technique to enhance her cultivation base, and that she was now at the end of her tether. Wild with joy, they immediately produced their immortal artifacts and threw them at Qianzhang Lake in a disorderly manner. Chapter 566. Princess Xianglu and her company did not have an incredible escape technique like Wu Qi, so it was impossible for them to escape through the earth without emitting any energy fluctuation. As long as the waterway did not collapse, Lord Xiansheng, Catfish, Goldhorn, and Silverhorn could swim freely in the water, and it was very easy for them to escape. But, without the waterway, no one could guarantee that they could escape under the noses of so many immortals. Lord Xiansheng reacted very quickly. He pressed his palm on the ground, and dozens of electric arcs darted out of his fingertips, instantly activating the dozens of formations they had laid out while recuperating in Qianzhang Lake. Accompanied by a low rumble, the grand array was activated, and a strange light enveloped the bottom of the 1,000-feet pool, illuminating everyone's faces with green and purple patches. The 1,000-feet pool suddenly turned into a magnificent world of light and shadow. Reverend Yao Yu was a fearsome 10th-tier heaven immortal, famous for his ruthlessness in the wandering immortal hall of Myriad Immortal Alliance. In the official files of Deyu alone, he was suspected to be related to the massacres in 17 provinces and 39 cities. On the official wanted list of Deyu, Reverend Yao Yu was a very famous fiend. Laughing wildly, Reverend Yao Yu's eyes went wide as he pressed his palms down. The man pointed his finger down, and the pearl emitted a bright white light as it pierced through the protection of the 9 formations. "I'm Reverend Yao Yu, an ally of Myriad Immortals," he said coolly. "I'm sure you have heard of my name." "We've laid out 36 formations," Princess Xianglu said coolly. "It seems that we still have 3 to 4 days. We'll try to wear them down with the formations, and then we'll find the right time to rush out." Even so, the several tens of immortal weapons still struck the first layer of the reverse 5 elements true lightning formation like thunderbolts. Lightning bolts soared up into the sky and tens of immortal artifacts with inferior quality were sent flying by the true lightning. As for those immortal artifacts with slightly better quality, they stuck themselves onto the great formation, spraying out countless flames, lightning bolts, and various other attacks to wear down the great formation inch by inch. Laughing strangely, Reverend Yao Yu walked up to Goldhorn and Silverhorn with his eyes gleaming. Before his voice could fade away, Princess Xianglu fell to the ground. The ancient supreme divine technique was powerful and mysterious, but it also put an unprecedented pressure on the user, and its side effects were equally terrible. Princess Xianglu had burned half of her divine soul, and her body had been severely injured. Her divine energy was now depleted, and she would not be able to recover in 7 days. Reverend Yao Yu heaved a long sigh as he stroked the bodies of Goldhorn and Silverhorn affectionately and said, my babies, you are the real babies. With you here, my future as a gold immortal will be bright." Patriarch Ji Mu, the 3 heretical Tao of Black Goat Mountain, and the 7 sages of Nushin Island were among the 30 or so most powerful heaven immortals. All of them took out their immortal artifacts and smashed them down on the 1,000-feet lake like a storm. It smashed onto the eggshell like a mountain, shattering the formation laid out by Princess Zhanglu. With a blink of his body, Reverend Yao Yu came before Princess Zhanglu and her company. He casually pointed his finger, and a spiritual light flew out. Princess Zhanglu and the others were all restrained by a restrictive spell, unable to move an inch. Princess Zhanglu breathed out a faint sigh as she looked at the destroyed first layer of the formation. Fortunately, she had used a secret technique to charge out of the 1,000-feet lake and killed more than 70% of the immortals. Otherwise, if all the immortals were still here, the array beneath the 1,000-feet lake would not have lasted for long if more than 200 immortals attacked at the same time. Thankfully, these heaven immortals had their own secrets, and did not dare to go all out and let their enemies take advantage of them. Otherwise, the first great formation would only last for 2 hours at most before it was broken. Catfish threw her arms around Princess Zhanglu, while Peppermint and Angelica hurried over and kept shoving healing spirit medicines into Princess Zhanglu's mouth. That little girl is seriously injured, and she will be ours sooner or later. And those 2 dragon pythons of fire and ice are even better. Isn't it better to have one less person fighting for such a treasure? The 3 evil sects cried out at the same time. The other immortals who had survived Princess Zhanglu's brutal slaughter were taken aback at first, but then they nodded at the same time, agreeing with the 3 evil sections. But, intentionally or unintentionally, the remaining heaven immortals had put some distance between each other. When they were attacking the 1,000-feet lake, they paid more attention to protecting themselves. Imperceptibly, the attacks against the 1,000-feet lake had weakened significantly. Patriarch Ji Mu's fiend technique leaned towards the clan of Yin ghosts, and his white bone flame sword was made of human bones, ghosts, and flame. However, the reverse 5 elements true thunder formation controlled the true thunder of 5 elements to attack the enemy. It was extremely fierce and contained pure yang energy, which made it the nemesis of all evil things. Impatiently, Patriarch Ji Mu was the first to strike. As soon as his 9 flying swords were struck by the endless thunderbolts, 6 of them were instantly shattered to pieces. Amidst a 5-colored beam of light, Princess Zhanglu plunged into the 1,000-feet lake, then immediately cried out, "Activate the formation and defend this place." Not even a drop of water was left in the 1,000-feet lake. The 9 white bone flame swords slashed at the first layer of the reverse 5 elements true thunder formation. A 5-colored thunderbolt soared into the sky and clashed head-on with the white bone flame swords. The thunderbolt struck the white bone flame swords and sent sparks flying in all directions. Frightening ghost howls echoed out, while phosphorescent light shot out from the swords, bringing along countless ghosts and monsters as they fled in the wind. Just as Patriarch Ji Mu was about to flee into the sky to heal his injuries, 3 green sword beams suddenly came shooting toward him, piercing through his forehead, heart, and lower abdomen at the same time. Taking advantage of the time when Patriarch Ji Mu was severely wounded, the 3 evil sects of Black Goat Mountain had attacked him. Any one of them had the same cultivation base as Patriarch Ji Mu, and with the 3 of them working together to launch a sneak attack, there was no way Patriarch Ji Mu could survive. Reverend Yao Yu roared with laughter and said, "I don't care about beautiful girls. They are just beautiful girls, where can I find them?" As Princess Zhanglu was about to say something, a huge pearl, about 10 feet in diameter and as bright as the moon, suddenly came crashing down from the sky. A deafening boom rang out as the pearl pierced through the defensive mechanisms of the 9 formations in a row. Qianzhang Lake, as well as all the puddles and wetlands within 1,000 miles in circumference, were shaken violently by the pearl. The ground floor collapsed, and the archway in front of the Dragon King mansion let out an unpleasant wail before shattering and falling to the ground. Gnashing their teeth, the 3 evil sects of Black Goat Mountain glared at the man and cried out, "May I know your name, Senior?" Princess Zhanglu was overjoyed. Looking at Qianzhang Dragon King, she said with a smile, "If we can escape from this calamity, you will be the main contributor. I'll definitely reward you handsomely in the future." Princess Zhanglu was delighted, and she gave Lord Xianqing a look. Without hesitation, Lord Xianqing transformed into a little dragon, less than a foot long, and plunged into the mud under the archway. About 2 hours later, Lord Xianqing quickly returned. There is indeed a waterway that leads to a great river 300,000 miles away, he said with a low chuckle. The ground caved in just now, and some parts of the waterway have collapsed, but the situation is not serious, and we can still pass through safely. Qianzhang Dragon King smiled so widely that his teeth were showing. You flatter me, he said while waving his hand. It's my honor to serve Goddess and Venerable Lord. Taking a deep breath, Qianzhang Dragon King looked up at the second formation that had exploded in the sky and said with a frown, it's just that these immortals are coming at us menacingly. I'm afraid Goddess has to be prepared to leave this place as soon as possible. Reverend Yao Yu gave Princess Zhang a glance, then shook his head and said, you are indeed a beauty. No wonder that useless Li Qinghua wants to capture you alive. Reverend Yao Yu laughed delightedly when he saw so many heaven immortals shielding their round shields. He nodded and said, excellent. Get the hell out of here. Let me capture these treasures first. Hee, even I am tempted by the 3 conditions those old fools have offered. Qianzhang Dragon King came over cautiously, pointed at the archway of the mansion, and said with a smile, I'm a coward, and I'm afraid of death. A long time ago, I dug a waterway under the archway that leads to a great river 300,000 miles away. The first to bear the brunt were the 9 white bone flame swords unleashed by Patriarch Jimu. 9 beams of white light, each about 1,000 feet long and shrouded in an eerie green flame, came whistling through the air, shaking off the water of Qianzhang Dragon King and slashing viciously at the first layer of light barrier over the mansion. Along with a thunderous boom, the water in the 1,000 deep pool soared up into the sky. All the water in the pool began to burn like oil. Guided by the phosphorescent fire, the water shot up tens of miles into the sky along with a large green light. The green fiery water spread out in all directions, enveloping the entire swamp and wetland in the ghostly fire. Princess Zhang stared in surprise at the pearl that was slowly flying back into the sky. She frowned and said, who is it? Who did this? High up in the sky, an elegant man clad in a white robe and with a huge pearl hovering above his head was seen hovering in midair. Looking down at the group of heaven immortals, including the 3 evils of Black Goat Mountain, who were dumbfounded, he said with a frown, even if you capture these people alive, you will never be able to bring them back to the headquarters of Myriad Immortal Alliance. Be obedient and leave. How can weak ants like you get a share of such benefits? Gritting her teeth, Princess Zhang sneered and said, that Taoist Ling, who knows the art of divination, has been killed by Patriarch GMO. As long as we can break out of these people's encirclement, we will at least have a long time to recuperate. As long as there are no immortals who are too powerful, we have a chance to escape this calamity. Suddenly, Reverend Yao Yu pouted and gave Goldhorn and Silverhorn a deep kiss. Lord Xianqing's face fell. He transformed into a little dragon the size of a loach and plunged into the mud under the archway. Before long, he came back and cried out in alarm, this is bad. The waterway has completely collapsed. There is no way out. Dozens of heaven immortals had joined forces. Although they were wary of each other and did not use their full strength when attacking, their cultivation bases were not to be underestimated. Under the continuous attack of dozens of immortal items, the first formation only lasted for an hour and a half before it was completely shattered. Reverend Yao Yu. Upon hearing that, the 30-odd heaven immortals present shuddered. Without saying a word, they retrieved their immortal items, turned into beams of light, and flew away in different directions. Patriarch GMO howled miserably as a large amount of blood sprayed out of his body. The white bone fire sword was his natal magical artifact, a set of immortal items that he had gone to great lengths to craft himself. Now, 6 of the 9 swords had been destroyed, and his immortal soul had been severely injured by the thunderbolts. At the same time, his whole body was bursting with tiny electric arcs, making him look like a huge light bulb that was glowing in the sky. Princess Zhang expression flickered abruptly. Whether or not there was a waterway underground was completely different. An intact waterway could allow them to evacuate Qianzhang Lake at the fastest speed. But, If they used the escape art of Earth to escape underground, it would undoubtedly release energy fluctuations, which would certainly attract the attention of those immortals in the sky. Chapter 567. No one expected that Reverend Yao Yu would kiss Gold Horn and Silver Horn in his excitement. The brothers' eyes went wide as they stared at Reverend Yao Yu, whose face was full of smiles, like wooden statues made of clay. After the time it took to finish a pot of tea, the brothers suddenly began to vomit. Their long bodies began to twitch from the tip of their tails, and with every twitch of their muscles, the ripples of their muscles stretched all the way to their heads as they vomited violently, spewing out a large amount of pungent venom and water. Male. Lao Tzu was kissed by a male. Damn it, you are a man. Why are you blaspheming us brothers? Damn it, do you like harem flowers? But we don't. You are a scum of the cultivators. Damn it, we are not Lord of Long Yang. You've got the wrong man. We have that precious fish as well, and you can't get any yin energy from us. It's useless for you to seduce us. Go and find Catfish. She is ugly, but she is a female fish. Gold Horn and Silver Horn cried and vomited, their bodies twitching and twitching, making them look very pitiful. Reverend Yao Yu's face alternated between blue and white, and he was so angry that he almost took out his pearl and gave the brothers a good beating. His face flickered with emotions as he gritted his teeth and said, "How dare you? You two beasts! Shut up! What harem flowers? What Lord of Long Yang? This is utter nonsense." Gold Horn and Silver Horn were still vomiting and cursing Reverend Yao Yu. They would not listen to him. Reverend Yao Yu's face twitched with anger, while Catfish shook her big head and cursed angrily. "What are you talking about? What are you talking about? How am I ugly? Look at my glossy and smooth skin, my healthy complexion, my elegant flood dragon whiskers, and my bright, expressive big eyes. How am I ugly?" She raised her head proudly and gave Reverend Yao Yu a sideways glance. Seduce? Bah! Even if I want to dual cultivate with him, I won't like this old white face. His arms and legs are so skinny that he can't even withstand a punch from me. How dare he take advantage of me? Reverend Yao Yu's face turned purple with anger. Gnashing his teeth, he said, "Shut up, or I'll cut off your tongues." Upon hearing Reverend Yao Yu's threat, Gold Horn, Silver Horn, and Catfish quickly shut their mouths. Princess Zhangli gave Reverend Yao Yu a cold look and said in a deep voice, "Reverend Yao Yu? Do you have a wife or children? Do you have any relatives?" Reverend Yao Yu gave Princess Zhangli a surprised look, then nodded slowly with a smile and said, "Yes. I have 300 wives and concubines, more than 1,400 children, and more than 10,000 relatives. These are all the properties I have gradually accumulated on Panga continent since I came here hundreds of periods." "Why do you ask?" Princess Zhangli said solemnly to Reverend Yao Yu, "I'll pay you back 100 times for what you've done today. Your clansmen will be slaughtered mercilessly, not sparing even the chickens and dogs." After pondering for a moment, Reverend Yao Yu suddenly laughed and slapped Princess Zhangli hard in the face. He laughed wildly and said, "Destroy my entire family. With just you. Who do you think you are? If young master had not asked me to capture you alive, I would have raped and killed you right now. I would have destroyed your soul and let you reincarnate as a ghost. And now, you want to retaliate against me? Why?" The heavy slap knocked Princess Zhongli's head to one side, and the corner of her mouth was broken, with blood dripping down. Princess Zhongli narrowed her eyes and stared at Reverend Yao Yu with hatred, gritting her teeth so hard that they made cracking noises. Since she was a child, when had Princess Zhongli ever suffered like this? Even when she was attacked by Patriarch Yuanhua in Yuanhua sect, she managed to escape in time through a teleportation formation, and did not suffer at all. Reverend Yao Yu had slapped her. Princess Zhongli had branded his name and appearance deep in her divine soul, and she would never forget it for the rest of her life. Feeling a little guilty under Princess Zhang Li's cold and merciless glare, Reverend Yao Yu snorted coldly and turned his head away sulkily. He gave Qianzhang Dragon King a look, who stood motionless off to the side, then looked at Angelica, Peppermint, Lord Xiansheng, Catfish Flood Dragon, and the others. He nodded slowly and said, "Young master only wants this girl and the 2 dragon pythons of fire and ice. Well, I'll just kill you here." Laughing strangely, Reverend Yao Yu tilted his head to look at Peppermint and Angelica, who had already grown up. "You 2 little beauties," he said in a lascivious tone, "your aptitude and talent are top-notch as well. It's a pity that those old fools who are as famous as me are on their way here, and we can't afford to waste any more time. Otherwise, I'll definitely let you know what it means to wish for death. TSK, what a pity." Sighing softly, Reverend Yao Yu pointed at the pearl, which was about 10 feet in diameter and emitting a faint moonlight as it slowly slid over Peppermint and Angelica's heads. "Well, since I can't enjoy it, I'll let you sisters reincarnate as soon as possible," he said coolly. "I'll kill you now and leave a mark in your souls. When you are reincarnated, I'll definitely find you and take you as my wives and concubines." The pearl suddenly descended and was about to hit Peppermint and Angelica's heads. Suddenly, a beam of black light shot out from Princess Zhang Li's sleeve. Reverend Yao Yu was startled, and he quickly pulled back the pearl. Without bothering to kill Peppermint and Angelica, he quickly hovered the pearl over his head and emitted a bright light to protect himself. Then, he casually pointed at Princess Zhang Li's sleeve, and a spirit talisman carved out of black jade drifted out and landed in his palm. The talisman glowed brightly, and the faint cries of swallows could be heard coming out of it. Reverend Yao Yu studied the talisman with a frown and said with a cold grin, "What is this? It looks like a talisman that can transmit messages." Princess Zhang Lu raised her brows and suddenly began to recite an incantation. As the incantation echoed out, the black talisman began to vibrate abruptly, and the cries of swallows could be heard clearly. Reverend Yao Yu was startled. A plume of purple heavenly flame burst out of his palm and burned the talisman in a flash. He shouted angrily, "How dare you ask for help in front of me? Hee, don't tell me you know some incredible person who can take you away from me." Before his voice could fade away, a gust of strong wind suddenly rang out over Qianzhang Lake, turning into a column of bluish-black wind and plunging down from the sky. An ear-piercing gust of wind blew up the rock layers around the Qianzhang Lake, turning the thick and heavy rocks into ashes, and then forcibly kneading them together, turning them into countless grains of sand that were strong enough to pierce through iron and steel, which were swept and smashed by the gust. The world was muddy, and the strong wind rolled up the sand and dust, rendering the naked eye useless. There was an extremely mysterious power in the bluish-black wind, and if one's divine sense tried to penetrate it, it would be slowly worn away by the sand and stones that were rolled up by the strong wind. It was a storm that even divine sense could not penetrate. The bluish-black storm had covered and ruled everything. The sun and moon were dimmed, and the stars were swaying. For a moment, there seemed to be nothing in the world except for this terrible storm. No. In the greenish-black storm, there was a vigorous figure. Reverend Yao Yu forced his eyes open and saw a figure flying rapidly in the storm. It was a green shadow, flapping its wings and soaring in the wind. Wherever it passed, the strong wind even tore the void apart, leaving deep marks in the void. "Who is it? How dare you?" Reverend Yao Yu was both anxious and angry. In his impression, only some senior immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance, who were as famous as him, could control the wind with such a terrifying ability that even his divine sense could not penetrate. The fact that the storm could tear the void proved that the person who controlled it had a frightening understanding of the laws of heaven and earth. A formidable enemy, an absolutely formidable enemy. Reverend Yao Yu could not help but roar furiously, "I'm Reverend Yao Yu from Mount Moon Gazing of High Province. Which fellow immortal is here? Please show yourself." The pearl hung over his head, its bright and lustrous glow teetering in the strong wind. Reverend Yao Yu was shocked. He had the cultivation base of a 10th-tier heaven immortal, and the pearl was an extraordinary artifact he had accidentally found in the deep sea of High Province. It was an upper-grade immortal artifact, at least a 15th-tier immortal artifact. Yet, the storm was so strong that he could barely stand it. Was the power of the storm not a little too strong? Amidst the gale, the green figure laughed in a deep voice, "Reverend Yao Yu from Mount Moon Gazing of High Province? Very well, Lao Tzu will remember you." A crisp bird cry towered into the sky, and amidst the strong wind, a divine beast of a gale, several miles long, revealed his true form. The dark green storm was swirling around the gale, and the rapid whistling of the wind shook the heaven and earth. Reverend Yao Yu's first reaction when he saw the beast was to retreat dozens of miles back. No one dared to provoke the gale, unless they were from a power with a very strong backer. As a divine beast who had mastered the laws of wind, how could the power of the gale be comparable to that of an ordinary immortal? There were many taboos for itinerant immortals on Pangu continent, and one of them was never to provoke the gale. Amidst the strong wind, the gale flapped its wings and rolled up Princess Zhanglu and the others, as well as the thousands of little demons who served Xianzhang Lake's Dragon King mansion, into the air, and were tightly wrapped up by the thick feathers on its wings. The gale gave Reverend Yao Yu a deep glare, and without saying a word, it suddenly soared into the sky, transforming into a gust of wind and speeding away. Divine beasts of gale were best at controlling storms, and their flying speed was the fastest in the universe. With just a flap of its wings, this gale had traveled millions of miles in the blink of an eye. Reverend Yao Yu was struck dumb for a moment, and then he suddenly came to his senses and said, "Why should I be afraid of you? No matter how strong you are, do you really dare to fight against Myriad Immortal Alliance's Divine Hall? After I kill you and capture that girl and those dragon pythons of fire and ice, I'll have Myriad Immortal Alliance as my backer to handle everything for me. What else do I have to be afraid of?" Grinning coldly, Reverend Yao Yu suddenly transformed into a beam of moonlight and sped toward the storm. "You feathered beast, put down the girl and the dragon pythons of fire and ice," he cried out. As his voice rang out, a few more beams of light flew up into the sky from a far distance, following closely behind him. Chapter 568. Flapping his wings, Wu Qi flew at high speed in the sky, his heart filled with rage. He saw the clear palm print on Princess Zhang Li's face, and he also sensed the unstable aura of Lord Xiansheng and the others. Clearly, they were attacked by the enemy, and Princess Zhanglu was even slapped in the face. He knew very well what a great insult it was for Princess Zhanglu, who had been born in the palace since she was a child and had a proud character. His green eyes rolled to the back of his eye sockets as he stared coldly at Reverend Yao Yu, who was chasing after him. With a gentle flap of his wings, he traveled hundreds of thousands of miles in a flash. The gale's speed was frighteningly fast, even beyond Wu Qi's own estimation. Reverend Yao Yu could only chase after him bitterly. Occasionally, he would teleport, but he could not effectively shorten the distance between him and Wu Qi. The gale was the fastest flying divine beast in the universe, and the only divine beast that could shatter the void with its speed. After possessing a trace of the bloodline of the gale, and using a chaotic spirit technique to transform himself into a complete gale, Wu Qi possessed all the innate divine abilities of the gale, and speed was his most powerful divine ability now. Long feathers wrapped tightly around Princess Zhanglu and the others, tying them to Wu Qi's back. Princess Zhanglu was quietly stroking Wu Qi's feathers. She sensed a very familiar aura from the big green bird. Lord Xiansheng, on the other hand, was frowning as he curiously sized up Wu Qi's huge body. Catfish, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn, however, were tossing and turning restlessly on Wu Qi's back, yelling and twisting their bodies. "What the hell is this bird trying to do by catching us?" "Help!" cried Catfish Flood Dragon. She opened her mouth wide, trying to tear a piece of flesh off Wu Qi's back. However, as the green feathers on Wu Qi's back were thick and dense, no matter how hard she tried, she could only tear off a mouthful of feathers, and did not even touch any flesh. Gold Horn and Silver Horn simply opened their mouths and breathed out hot waves of cold air, burning Wu Qi's feathers and making them emit a burnt smell. One of Wu Qi's feathers was pierced by the two brothers, and the heat and cold light even caused a sharp pain to spread from Wu Qi's back. Angrily, Wu Qi let out a shrill bird cry that pierced through the clouds and cursed, "Gold horn, silver horn, if you keep fooling around, I'll break your bones." As soon as Wu Qi's voice entered their ears, Gold Horn and Silver Horn cried out in terror, "Master, boss, senior immortal, how did you turn into a bird? My God, you turned into a bird? How are you going to consummate your marriage with Her Highness? My God, how can a bird do that with a woman?" When Princess Xianglu heard Wu Qi's voice, her pretty face flushed with excitement. But, when she suddenly heard Gold Horn and Silver Horn's nonsense, Princess Xianglu was so angry that she raised her palms and slapped the brothers on the head. A series of slaps rang out, and Gold Horn and Silver Horn curled up and dared not to move. Lord Xiansheng, on the other hand, was laughing and clapping his hands, praising the two great snakes for being taught a lesson. Hurried whistles of piercing wind were heard coming from behind once again. In addition to Reverend Yao Yu, over 30 beams of light of various colors had joined the hunt for Wu Qi. Myriad Immortal Alliance's latent power on Pangu continent was enormous. After Li Qinghua issued the arrest warrant, hundreds of thousands of immortals from the alliance had joined the hunt for Princess Xianglu and her companions, including 100 senior heaven immortals with formidable cultivation bases like Reverend Yao Yu. Those weaker heaven immortals could not keep up with Wu Qi's speed, but these heaven immortals whose cultivation bases were similar to Reverend Yao Yu were hot on their heels. Moreover, they kept threatening Wu Qi to stop and hand over Princess Xianglu and her companions to them. Wu Qi laughed coldly. The dozens of formidable heaven immortals behind him had given him a great threat, but how could he hand over the people on his back to them? His lover, his brothers, his friends, and his two unreliable subordinates were all people close to him. How could he hand them over to these greedy immortals? Wu Qi gave a long cry. Suddenly, a large green storm burst out from his wings, while tiny specks of starlight flickered in his eyes. Each speck of starlight corresponded to a star in the sky. It was broad daylight, and bright starlight was twinkling in the sky. As soon as Wu Qi performed the 7 luminaries star-fixing art, a great sheet of starlight poured down from the sky and turned into a dense silver glow that enveloped Princess Xianglu and her companions. Immediately, an immortal bellowed in exasperation, "I can't believe that fellow is proficient in the star divination art. He has disturbed the heaven's secret, so I can no longer track them. My fellow immortals, we must not let them escape. Otherwise, once they escape from us today, we will never be able to find them again." Wu Qi laughed. The green storm swirled around him, and his flying speed suddenly doubled. The silver glow swept across Princess Xianglu and her companions over and over again. Wu Qi forcibly cut off some of the power of karma from them, isolating them from being tracked by some immortals who were proficient in the art of divination. Princess Xianglu smiled happily. She gently stroked Wu Qi's thick and smooth feathers, frowned and asked, "How did you turn into a big bird?" Wu Qi gave a helpless cry and said with a wry smile, "It's a long story. I'll tell you in detail after we escape from these people." "Well, these bastards, are they really going to fight to the death? Those damn union of 10,000 immortals, are the 3 conditions of their bounty so attractive?" Immediately, Jin Jiao grinned and said, "Master, we can't let those people from Myriad Immortal Alliance go. They have slapped Princess in the face. TSK, they even want to extract our internal organs to make some kind of spirit paste. Good heavens, they are so cruel. We may be the last 2 dragon pythons of fire and ice in this world, and the great responsibility of reproducing our race rests on us. Isn't that right?" Silverhorn howled. "If they kill us, they will completely destroy a race, and that will be the revenge of the heavenly Tao." Wu Qi snorted coldly and murmured in a low voice, then snapped, "Cut the crap. Hurry up and extract a trace of your bloodline and give it to me." Gold Horn and Silver Horn were stunned, but they were used to obeying any order from Wu Qi. Therefore, without hesitation, they immediately burned their blood essence and extracted a trace of their bloodline from their bodies. After the time to finish a pot of tea, 2 bloodlines, each as thick as a thumb and over 100 feet long, were sprayed out of their mouths. They were gold and silver in color, one emitting a threatening heat wave, while the other emitted a terrible cold air. Wu Qi gave a long hiss as he swallowed the two bloodlines and began to refine them with the 7 foundation elevating technique. Just like the bloodline of the divine bird, Gale, after he had fused these two bloodlines into his body, he immediately possessed the ability to transform into a real dragon python of fire and ice, as well as all the innate divine abilities of a dragon python. He had already obtained the cultivation method of the dragon python mystic scripture from the Golden Horn and Silver Horn brothers. In the future, he could also use this ruthless dragon python mystic scripture as his own cultivation method. His body glowed with a dazzling gold and silver light as Wu Qi sped forward amidst a billowing storm. Occasionally, he looked back and saw that the dozens of heaven immortals behind him had stopped shouting and were chasing after him with all their might. These heaven immortals had exerted all their strength to capture the people on Wu Qi's back alive. They had used all their strength to flee and had completely neglected to protect themselves. With a wild roar, Wu Qi suddenly leaped forward. The storm on his wings shattered the void as he teleported a long distance forward with Princess Zhang Lu and the others, then immediately landed on a lofty mountain. His fleshly body squirmed like flowing mercury, and in the blink of an eye, Wu Qi had transformed from a big blue bird into a silver-white dragon python with a pair of huge fleshy wings on his back. As a 21st tier heaven immortal, Wu Qi's cultivation base was much higher than that of Gold Horn and Silver Horn. As a result, the dragon python Wu Qi had transformed into was more than 10 miles long, and his huge body coiled around the lofty mountain like a small hill. A faint chill was emanating from the silver armor, and a pure pressure of a dragon python was spreading in all directions. Lord Xiansheng was still able to stand on his feet, but Catfish and Qianzhang Dragon King, who were also flood dragons, were lying limply on the ground, unable to move even their fingers. Laughing strangely, he suddenly opened his mouth and shot out a beam of cold light that was about 100 feet in diameter. After traveling tens of miles, the beam of cold light abruptly turned into countless rapidly spinning dark ice spikes, piercing through the air with a shrill whistle, and in the blink of an eye, it had arrived in front of the immortals who were chasing after him. The combination of the innate divine ability of dragon pythons and the offensive divine ability of condensing energy into ice found in the Darkeen water scripture had produced a terrible power. With the overall strength of a 21st tier heaven immortal, and the 90% of the divine power of the wind god in his body that had not been digested yet, the power contained in Wu Qi's strike was frighteningly strong. Reverend Yao Yu and the other 30-odd heaven immortals, whose cultivation bases ranged from 10th to 15th tier, could never have dreamed that a gale would transform into a colossal dragon python in the blink of an eye. Never in their wildest dreams did they expect that Wu Qi would suddenly stop and launch a desperate attack at them. The ice spikes came whistling over. The 19 heaven immortals had no time to unleash their immortal items, and the item spirits of their protective immortal items had no time to react either. The ice spikes had already pierced through their chests. The terrible chill froze their bodies, causing thick layers of xianbing to form all over them. Wu Qi did not launch a second strike, because as soon as the 19 heaven immortals were frozen by Wu Qi, Reverend Yao Yu and the other heaven immortals who were not injured attacked them at the same time. All kinds of immortal items fell from the sky, killing the 19 heaven immortals whose bodies were severely injured. Laughing wildly, Wu Qi twisted his body and transformed into the gale again, sweeping up Princess Zhang Lu and the others as he spun and fled. As he fled, Wu Qi cried out, "How dare you bunch of rabble plot against Lao Tzu's men? Ha ha ha, Lao Tzu can stop at any time and give you a fatal blow. Do you dare to join hands and hunt down Lao Tzu? Ha ha ha, you'd better watch out for the people around you to attack you first." As Wu Qi had expected, Reverend Yao Yu and the others stopped in shock and fear, allowing Wu Qi to bring them away. Reverend Yao Yu and the others suddenly realized that it was possible for Wu Qi to kill them, and the heaven immortals around them were all competitors with ulterior motives. No one could guarantee that they would be able to capture and kill Wu Qi and obtain the generous rewards offered by Myriad Immortal Alliance. Immortals were the most selfish and cautious. Between their own lives and the rewards, Reverend Yao Yu and the others had wisely chosen their own lives. Only Wu Qi's clear cry could be heard coming from afar. Myriad Immortal Alliance. Just wait for Lao Tzu to settle the score with you. Tell Li Qinghua to wash his neck and wait. Chapter 569. The Ancient Road of Tea Silk in Anhui County. It was a trade route opened up by Anhui County many years ago, from the tea and silk producing areas in the mountainous area to Hele City, the capital city of Anhui County. Currently, a line of 3 coaches was traveling at top speed on the ancient road of tea silk, and Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu were sitting in the first coach. In his sleeve were more than 1,000 little demons who served Qianzhong Dragon King, whom Wu Qi had temporarily collected with the mustard seed magic. Once again, he felt the pain of his magic power flowing out of his body. He began to miss his huge spirit breeding ring. If he still had it, he would not have to waste his magic power to collect these little demons. Princess Zhanglu sat cross-legged next to Wu Qi, while Goldhorn and Silverhorn sat on either side of Wu Qi, their eyes flashing with a fierce gleam. Wu Qi performed an incantation gesture with both hands, constantly gathering streams of pure star power, turning them into numerous mysterious runes and sprinkling them on Princess Zhanglu, Goldhorn, and Silverhorn. From time to time, the silver light would tremble, as if some great invisible force was colliding with the silver light Wu Qi had condensed. Whenever this happened, Wu Qi's body would twitch for a moment, and his internal organs would be wrung by the invisible force. After escaping the pursuit of Reverend Yao Yu and the other heaven immortals with Princess Zhanglu, Wu Qi brought Princess Zhanglu and the others back to Anhui County without stopping. But, just as Wu Qi was about to bring Princess Zhanglu to the underhand sect in Mount Picking Star, some immortals with very strong cultivation bases attacked Princess Zhanglu, Goldhorn, and Silverhorn. An invisible force swept across from all directions, tracking the whereabouts of Princess Zhanglu, Goldhorn, and Silverhorn. The immortals focused their attention on Princess Zhanglu, Goldhorn, and Silverhorn, but spared Catfish, Lord Xiansheng, Angelica, and Peppermint. Wu Qi felt helpless. He could have rushed back to Mount Picking Star very quickly, but now he could only take a carriage. He did his best to conceal the presence of Princess Zhanglu, Goldhorn, and Silverhorn with his magic power. Another silver glow sprinkled on Princess Zhanglu, Goldhorn, and Silverhorn. Once the silver magic talismans were formed, a muffled bang came abruptly. Along with a cracking sound, tens of magic talismans were shattered. Wu Qi's body quivered, and he almost vomited a mouthful of blood. Suddenly, an illusion appeared before Wu Qi's eyes. He seemed to see a huge altar, on which an old man in a white robe was standing with a peachwood sword in his hand, and a few turtle shells were floating in front of him. The old man was breathing fire to burn the turtle shells, trying to divine the whereabouts of Princess Zhanglu, Goldhorn, and Silverhorn. Wu Qi gave a cold snort. Once again, he produced a spirit talisman from the 7 luminaries star-fixing technique and sprinkled it on Princess Zhanglu, Goldhorn, and Silverhorn. Then, in his spiritual ocean, he meditated on a divine art of the Tao of Ghost and God taught by Princess Zhanglu, the air-splitting and body-shattering curse, which was a divine art of the Tao of Ghost and God taught by Princess Zhanglu. He transformed the chaotic energy into a strange, gloomy, obscure divine power, and condensed it into 7 evil talismans in his spiritual ocean. Then, following the faint guidance in the illusion, he threw them out. A ball of green light suddenly exploded in the carriage. Within the green light, one could clearly see the white-robed old man on a tall altar let out a shrill howl. The floating tortoise shell in front of him exploded in the air, and a line of blood appeared between the white-robed old man's eyebrows, all the way to his heart. A large amount of blood spurted out from that line of blood. The old man waved his peachwood sword and drew dozens of mysterious talismans in the air, then threw out a large number of spirit talismans to wrap himself up. A shrill whistle rang out of the green light, and the old man's voice rang out in the carriage with a hint of ghostly aura. "Fellow immortal, I've offended you. Please show mercy and let me go. I won't meddle in this matter again." Wu Qi gave a cold snort. He bit the tip of his tongue and shot a mouthful of black blood into the green light. In the green light, the altar, which was as huge as a hill, exploded. The old man and all the magical items around him were blown to pieces, leaving only a bloody immortal soul flying up into the sky with a venomous curse. But, as soon as the immortal soul flew out, Princess Zhanglu quietly reached out her little hand and pressed it against the green light. The five-colored divine light trembled slightly. Suddenly, a large sheet of black wind and green flames sprayed out from the immortal soul. The wind and fire swirled, engulfing the old man's immortal soul and burning it to ashes in an instant. "Zi Xian, are you feeling better now?" asked Wuqi delightedly. Princess Zhanglu nodded and smiled. Her hands unleashed a faint five-colored divine light that enveloped Gold Horn and Silver Horn. She smiled and said, "It's not good, but at least I have the power to protect myself. As long as the five-colored divine light is not extinguished, those immortals will never be able to find Zi Xian. Now, it's Gold Horn and Silver Horn who are in the way. Their auras are too strong, so it won't be difficult to find them." With a shake of his hand, Wuqi shattered the green light. He did not seem to care that he and Princess Zhanglu had just joined forces to kill a formidable immortal. Instead, he curled his fingers and gave Gold Horn and Silver Horn a few knocks on their heads. "Don't worry," he said with a smile. "Once we return to Mount Picking Star, with the protective formation concealing our auras, no matter how strong those immortals' divination arts are, they won't be able to find Gold Horn and Silver Horn." With a wave of his hand, he unleashed a stream of chaotic energy to wrap up Gold Horn and Silver Horn. "No one can find Gold Horn and Silver Horn unless they are primordial immortals who can search the entire Pangu continent with their eyes," said Wuqi in a deep voice. "I don't believe that Myriad Immortal Alliance can ask a primordial immortal to help us." Princess Zhanglu nodded slowly. Suddenly, the silver glow around them began to fluctuate again, and there were immortals who were proficient in divination arts tracking them. On top of that, there were immortals who were proficient in the art of divination tracking and locating them. They had been harassed countless times over the past few days. A frightening killing intent suddenly emerged on Princess Zhongli's pretty face. "Myriad Immortal Alliance, Li Qinghua." Princess Zhonglu waved a beam of five-colored divine light to protect everyone. She gritted her teeth and said, "They have pushed us too far. How did I offend them? If I can't pay them back 100 times over, I swear I'm not a human." With one swift motion, Wuqi grabbed Gold Horn and Silver Horn, who were protected by both chaotic energy and five-colored divine light, and threw them out of the carriage. Gold Horn and Silver Horn gave a strange cry as they flew up into the air and squeezed into the second carriage behind them, where they were squeezed together with Lord Xiansheng and Qianzhang Dragon King. After throwing the two fellows out of the carriage, Wuqi gently put his arms around Princess Zhanglu. "When that patriarch Yuan Hua was plotting against us, I was really afraid that something would go wrong with you," he said in a low voice. "Fortunately, you were alert and managed to escape successfully." Princess Zhanglu smiled like a pool of spring water as she fell softly into Wuqi's arms. Gently rubbing Wuqi's long hair with both hands, Princess Zhanglu narrowed her eyes and rubbed against Wuqi's chest lazily like a cat. But soon, she opened her eyes, which shone with a frightening killing intent. "I've determined that Yuan Hua sect is doomed. Once my cultivation base surpasses that of Patriarch Yuan Hua, I'll immediately kill their entire sect. What do you say?" Thinking of the despair he felt when Daoist Qi and Daoist Min used their primordial gold talismans to kill him, Wuqi's eyes shone with a frightening killing intent. He gritted his teeth and said, "Of course. When we are ready and the situation on Pangu continent is stabilized, we'll find an opportunity to return to Yuan Hua sect. Patriarch Yuan Hua, Putting aside the fact that he almost killed me, I've lost so many energy stones, immortal stones, and natural treasures. Wuqi even had the thought of eating someone alive." His black dragon spirit ring, which contains so many natural treasures, had turned Wuqi from a billionaire into a penniless poor man just because of a primordial gold talisman. The feeling of falling from heaven to hell still drove Wuqi mad when he thought about it. Waves of mysterious forces were still attacking them from the void. The immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance were still trying their best to find the whereabouts of Princess Xianglu, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn. However, with Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu working together, as both of them were proficient in the art of ghosts and deities, and possessed endless divine abilities and mystic arts of divination, these immortals could never locate the whereabouts of Princess Xianglu, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn. Very soon, the three chariots arrived at Mount Picking Star. Princess Xianglu was able to control a little bit of her divine energy, and Wu Qi was able to free his hands to exercise his divine abilities, bringing the company to the main peak of Mount Picking Star. A white cloud landed on a platform halfway up the main peak of Mount Picking Star. The disciples of Underhand sect, who were diligently transplanting exotic flowers and plants and decorating the scenery on the platform, dropped to their knees and cried, "Greetings, Ancestral Master." In unison. Wu Qi answered coolly, waved his hand, and flicked his sleeve. Immediately, over 1,000 little demons from Qianzhang Lake rolled out from under his sleeve, squeaking and squeaking. The disciples of Underhand sect were struck dumb, while the little demons were struck dumb when they saw the picturesque scenery in front of them. The natural scenery of Mount Picking Star was excellent, and it was a world of difference when compared to the stinking pond of Qianzhang Lake, which was filled with barren hills and unruly waters. The little demons had never seen such a scenery, and they had never seen a blessed land with such abundant natural energy. Some of them stood there in a daze, their saliva dripping down their cheeks. Wu Qi clapped his hands and cried out loudly, "All right, don't just stand there in a daze. From now on, Qianzhang Lake will be merged with Underhand sect, and Qianzhang Old Dragon will be the elder of Underhand sect. This is Princess Xianglu, the vice sect leader of Underhand sect. When I'm not here, she will be in charge of all the affairs in the sect." After a moment of silence, Wu Qi clapped his hands and said, "Even if I'm here, you'll have to listen to her. Don't ask me." "Ha! Brother Three Flame, Eugene, Beiji, Shuemei, come here. Let's get to know each other." As Wu Qi's voice rang out, Supremacy Three Flame, Eugene, and the others came out of the cave abode. They were taken aback when they saw the little demons rolling and crawling on the ground. Then, they looked at the beautiful Princess Xianglu, the handsome and mighty Lord Xiansheng, the bedraggled catfish flood dragon, and the ferocious Gold Horn and Silver Horn. Supremacy Three Flame and the others felt that their brains were not working properly. After being busy for some time, Wu Qi had introduced all the people to him, then confirmed their positions in the sect. It went without saying that Princess Xianglu was the vice sect leader. Lord Xiansheng, Catfish Flood Dragon, Qianzhang Old Dragon King, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn were all elders. Very quickly, Wu Qi gave them dozens of designs of the defensive formation. With Princess Xianglu in charge, the construction of the formation was not a problem. With the sudden increase of over 1,000 little demons in Underhand sect, the number of affairs in the sect had increased significantly. Wu Qi clarified the responsibilities of each person. Just as he finished sorting out the troublesome matters, a messenger talisman flew into Wu Qi's hand. It was sent by Wu Qi. The great oracle of the Directorate of Celestials in Anhui City, Yumu, had an urgent matter to discuss with Wu Qi. Chapter 570. When the moon hung high in the sky above the Anhui County's Directorate of Celestials, Wu Qi came to its front door, treading on the dew on the flagstone street. The braziers on top of the huge stone pillars were still burning fiercely. Green flames soared tens of feet into the sky, and the emerald light enveloped more than half of Anhui City, representing the official rule of the Deyu dynasty over Anhui City and the entire Anhui County. A few oracles clad in linen robes with different patterns of stars embroidered on their sleeves stood in front of the door. Their pale faces were illuminated by the emerald light, making them look like ghosts who had just crawled out of the ground. They were emanating a cold and desolate aura that made one feel uneasy. When they saw Wu Qi coming, a pale green gleam flashed in the eyes of the few oracles. Without making a sound, they stepped aside and gestured to Wu Qi that he could go straight in. Wu Qi could not help but shudder at the sight of these oracles, whose aura was almost like that of a ghost. He could not figure out how these oracles of the Directorate of Celestials cultivated, and what kind of strange mystic technique they were practicing. Fortunately, the primordial Tao of divinity Princess Xianglu inherited was very different from these oracles. Otherwise, if Princess Xianglu ended up like this, he would rather let Princess Xianglu cripple all her cultivation base. He cupped his fist and bowed to these oracles, then walked through the entrance of the Directorate of Celestials with steady steps, and walked along the deep corridor into the main hall. The huge fire pillar was still bursting with a strong flame, and a large chair carved out of white jade was placed in front of it. Yu Miao was sitting on it with his head bowed, fiddling with a string of black beads made from an unknown bone. Curiously, Wu Qi gave the string of black pearls a glance. A very powerful energy wave was emanating from it, and there was a very magical life force contained within it. When he looked closer, he saw a faint blood-red gleam flickering in the black beads. It was spreading and shrinking from time to time, beating like a human heart. It was a very powerful magical item, and Wu Qi had no idea where Yu Miao got it. The sound of footsteps alerted Yu Miao. He shoved the string of beads into his sleeve, rose to his feet, and bowed slightly to Wu Qi. The chair that he had been sitting on sank into the ground like a puddle of water, leaving no trace behind. Wu Qi bowed to Yu Mu and asked in a deep voice, "May I know what the Great Oracle wants from me?" Yu Mu twitched the corner of his mouth and said with a wry smile, "You're really a good lieutenant. I haven't seen you in Anhe City for so many days. Where have you been?" He swung his arm forcefully, and his fist pierced through the air, bringing with it an ear-piercing explosion. Wu Qi said carelessly, "I went to the mountains to cultivate." "Oh, my cultivation has increased by quite a bit, and I've even obtained some pretty good divine ability cultivation methods." "Ha!" Yu Miao's eyes lit up as he smiled and said, "Oh?" His strength had increased. How strong could it be? What kind of divine ability did you obtain? After a brief moment of pondering, the ground under Wu Qi's feet suddenly began to tremble slightly. He had communicated with the power of the underground energy vein, and his body swayed along with the slight tremble. In the blink of an eye, he vanished from Yu Miao's sight, and reappeared in a corner of the great hall. A loud boom rang out. Wu Qi could not stop himself, and his shoulders slammed into the wall of the great hall. A great sheet of white light burst out from the wall, which was protected by nearly 100 layers of restrictive runes. Amidst a series of cracking noises, the white light that Wu Qi's shoulder touched shattered one after another, and his shoulders slammed into the wall with an unstoppable force, leaving a hole several feet deep in the wall made of heavy boulders. The main hall of Directorate of Celestials shook violently for a few times, and was nearly knocked down by Wu Qi's shoulder. A strange gleam flickered in Yu He's eyes as he cried out sternly, "Excellent! Kuafu chasing the sun step. I can't believe you can comprehend such a divine ability by yourself. You are indeed a born warrior. The fact that you can destroy the restrictive spells in this great hall proves that your overall strength is far superior to mine." The sound of hurried footsteps kept ringing out as the oracles and guards of the Directorate of Celestials rushed into the main hall. The noise caused by Wu Qi was so loud that not only the Directorate of Celestials, even the soldiers who were on duty in the nearby military court and punishment court were alerted. When Yu Miao saw these people rushing in, he hurriedly waved his hand and snapped, "Don't worry, it's just Tan Lang practicing here. Get out of here now, and don't come in without being summoned." The oracles and soldiers looked at the deep hole that Wu Qi had created on the wall, then bowed to Yu Miao and left the great hall respectfully. Yu Miao circled around the pillar of fire excitedly, clapped his hands, and said with a smile, "Wonderful. I can't believe you can comprehend a divine ability like the Kuafu chasing the sun step. This proves that your potential is really amazing. You haven't taken those pills that can aid your cultivation, have you? I can't believe that you've already achieved such an achievement. I was right about you." Taking a deep breath, Yu Miao walked up to Wu Qi and bowed solemnly. Wu Qi helped Yu Miao to his feet and said with a smile, "Just tell me what you want to say, Great Oracle." "Tan Lang is a rough man, and he doesn't like to beat around the bush." Holding his throat, Wu Qi deliberately spoke in a low, muffled voice, vividly playing the role of a rough and straightforward warrior. Yu Miao smiled satisfactorily and said in a deep voice, "I do have something to discuss with General Tan Lang." After a brief moment of silence, Yu Miao said, "The military court of Anhui City. Forget it." Halfway through his words, he shook his head and said with a cold grin, "Those soldiers in the military court are just newly recruited. How strong can their cultivation base be? Rather than letting them do their work, General Tan Lang alone is more useful." Looking at Wu Qi with a flicker in his eyes, Yu Miao said in a deep voice, "The opportunity is right in front of us, and a great opportunity is waiting for us." Wu Qi looked at Yu Miao with a puzzled expression and asked with a frown, "What great opportunity? What can we get from it?" Yu Miao clapped his hands excitedly and pulled out the string of black beads from under his sleeve. Fiddling with the string of beads with both hands, he hurriedly told Yu Miao why he was looking for Wu Qi. It was actually very simple. Zhong Province had a new ruler. As a first-grade province, Zhong Province controlled the power of life and death, rewards and punishments in the 300 nearby provinces. Since the prefecture overseer of Zhong Province had changed, all the officials in the other 300 provinces would have to be replaced as well. According to the official statement of Diyu, the former prefecture overseer of Zhong Province, Feng Lingling, had framed a prince of the imperial family and destroyed the friendly relationship between Diyu dynasty and the celestial court. He had committed the most heinous crime, and had been executed by the heavenly army of Diyu dynasty, along with his entire clan. Feng Lingling, the prefecture overseer of Zhong Province, was a thing of the past, and the one who replaced him now was Bo Zhongfu, who had just taken office 7 days ago. Bo Zhongfu was born in the Bo clan, and he had been a close official of the human emperor for generations. It was the first time a member of the Bo clan had left Yuxiong Plain to take up the post of prefecture overseer of Zhong Province. The Bo clan was one of the top clans in Diyu, and it had countless vassal clans. Therefore, when Bo Zhongfu became the prefecture overseer of Zhong Province, he had a strong demand for power in all 300 provinces. Just like the county governor of Anhui County, who had fled with his entire family, and Feng Lingling, who was accused of a heinous crime and had his entire clan executed, nearly half of the prefecture overseers of the 300 provinces under the rule of Zhong Province had either committed suicide, tied themselves up to beg for forgiveness, or left with their entire family, and disappeared. The officials and local powerful clans under the rule of these large provinces were thrown into chaos. Many of them voluntarily handed over the power in their hands. Wu Qi understood Yu Mu's words. According to the official statement of Diyu, Feng Lingling's entire clan had been executed. Even if he was still alive, he was already a thing of the past. On the other hand, Zhong Province was bound to undergo a major change. Many lucrative positions such as prefecture overseer, county governor, city lord, and so on were now vacant, waiting for a new owner to take them. So, the great oracle is tempted? Wu Qi put on a surprised look as he looked at Yu Mu. Do you want to be the city lord? Or the county governor? A strange gleam flashed across Yu Mu's eyes. Gnashing his teeth, he stared at Wu Qi and cried out, "Is the position of city lord and county governor worth so much effort? The position of prefecture overseer is the power of a province. Apart from those who have strong backers in Yuxiong Plain, the other 200 prefecture overseers of the 300 provinces must be replaced. How can I let such a good opportunity slip by?" Holding up 3 fingers, Yu Mu said in a deep voice, "Yu clan of Zhong Province has made a great contribution in suppressing Feng Lingling's rebellion. Therefore, the new Marquis of Zhong has promised us a share of 30 provinces. Among them, 1 will be a 2nd-grade province, 1 will be a 3rd-grade province, 1 will be a 4th-grade province, 2 will be a 5th-grade province, 2 will be a 6th-grade province, 3 will be a 7th-grade province, 4 will be an 8th-grade province, and the rest will be 9th-grade provinces." With a twisted face, Yu Mu growled, "The positions above the 8th-grade provinces are targeted by the elders of the clan. But, the power of 16 9th-grade provinces is not weaker than any of my brothers. So, why can't I fight for one?" Wu Qi blinked his eyes as he slowly gave himself a thumbs up and said, "So, what do you mean, great oracle?" Yu took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "In my generation, there are 270 brothers who will compete with me for the position of prefecture overseer of 16 ninth grade provinces. Among them, there are 7 whom I will never be able to compete with. I dare not offend these 7 brothers, and I will not provoke them. As for the rest, there are 19 brothers who are on par with me in every aspect. If I can defeat them, I will be able to take control of a province." The land of a province was very attractive. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes. It was indeed very attractive. He thought that Zhang Yi and Baiqi were still working hard to run a small city, and if he could have the land of a province as his foundation, perhaps he could move Yan Dan and the others to Panga continent as soon as possible. With the help of Great Yan's experienced strategists and generals. Wu Qi thought for a long time, but he could not imagine what they would do when they came to Panga continent and got the land of a province as their foundation. After pondering for a long time, Wu Qi chuckled and said, "How can I defeat them?" Yu gazed deeply at Wu Qi and said very seriously, "My father has just sent me a message. As long as I can prove that I'm stronger than those brothers, I will have the land of a province. First, my cultivation base must be stronger than them. Second, the people I recruit must be stronger than them." Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, "Then, when will the decision be made?" Yu raised a finger and said, "A month later, in Zhongning City, there will be a meeting of Yu clan to decide the ownership of 16 ninth grade provinces." Looking at Wu Qi asked with a smile, "So, what can I get in return?" Yu raised his right palm and said in a deep voice, "The heaven and earth, ghosts and deities are my witnesses. If Tan Lang can help me gain the power of a province, Tan Lang will be the sole ruler of the military, and 30% of the province will be inherited by Tan Lang. 30% of the land of a large province?" Wu Qi nodded with satisfaction and patted Yu on the shoulder. "Deal." Chapter 571. As he strode out of the Directorate of Celestials, Wu Qi looked back at the few huge stone pillars in front of the entrance and suddenly grinned. So, this was the internal strife of the Yu clan. Every son was trying his best to climb up the ranks, and as long as there was a tiny benefit, they would pounce on it like a pack of mad dogs and share it. In this kind of naked competition, there was no kinship, no brotherly friendship, only a cruel exchange of interests. I suppose this is the way of survival for the aristocratic clans of Great Yu on Panga continent. Only the strongest could lead the clan to flourish and grow. Yu Miao had brazenly betrayed Feng Lingling in exchange for a huge benefit. For Yu clan, the prefecture overseer of 30 provinces was undoubtedly the best opportunity for them to strengthen their clan. For every member of Yu clan, it was also the best opportunity to elevate their status in the clan and accumulate their personal strength. One could easily understand how many benefits a province could bring to a person. As long as an ordinary member of Yu clan had the resources of a province as his backing, he could get any spirit pills or miraculous herbs. Even if it was a pig, with a huge amount of resources, this pig could become a golden immortal pig. Not to mention that these members of Yu clan were not pigs. On the contrary, they were all shrewd and experienced elites. I have 1 month to improve my cultivation base as much as I can. Wu Qi strode into the mountains near Anhe City, then immediately exercised the Kuafu chasing the sun's step and vanished without a trace. After taking a big detour, he returned to Mount Picking Star. Since Yu Miao could find Wu Qi as a helper, those brothers who were competing with him were naturally not to be trifled with. Perhaps, they could find some formidable figures to be their retainers. Besides, in the competition for the position of prefecture overseer, anyone would do their best, and a slight carelessness would put them in danger of death. In order to help Yu Miao, Wu Qi could not use any divine abilities or magic. He could only use the power of the true body of heaven and earth scripture, which greatly restricted Wu Qi's strength. If he wanted to win, he would have to push his cultivation base to a higher level within this month. With countless thoughts tumbling in his mind, Wuqi strode into the cave abode of Underhand's sect and came to the meeting hall in the center of the first of the 18 cave abodes. It was a huge house built with logs by Supremacy 3 Flame and his disciples during the month when Wuqi was away. Up in the grand hall, Princess Xianglu and Eugene So were calculating all the resources that Underhand's sect currently possessed. They were calculating how long it would take to produce a batch of useful disciples if these resources were distributed evenly to each disciple. Starting from Wuqi, most of the disciples in Underhand's sect were hands-off managers. Except for Princess Xianglu and Eugene, no one was willing to do such painstaking work. In a corner of the hall, Lord Xiansheng was gritting his teeth with a writing brush in his hand, calculating the number of human disciples and demons in Underhand's sect, as well as their cultivation bases. Lord Xiansheng was not interested in the various chores of the sect, but he had a great passion for leading troops to war and training soldiers. He was dividing the Underhand sect's disciples into teams, preparing to train them into an elite army. As for Catfish, Goldhorn, and Silverhorn, well, they were huddled in a corner of the hall, humming as they digested the immortal souls and flesh they had devoured a few days ago. Peppermint and Angelica were laboriously carrying one bloody deer, gazelles, and other prey to their mouths for the three masters to enjoy. While digesting the enormous energy essence in their bodies, they did not forget to satisfy their desire for good food. Wuqi admired the way these three masters did things. But with something on his mind, Wuqi was too lazy to pay attention to these chores. He rushed to Princess Xianglu, grabbed Princess Zhongli's little hand, and walked out of the hall. As he rushed out of the hall, Wuqi turned to Eugene and said with a smile, "Eugene, I'll leave everything here to you. You can handle all the chores that need to be done. As for the daily cultivation of the disciples, you can discuss it with anyone you like." Eugene blinked and could not come to his senses for a long while. Discuss it with someone? Who could he discuss it with? But Eugene had the temperament of a good old gentleman. Since Wuqi had given him the order, he could only nod his head and answer, then went to work hard to manage all the daily affairs of Underhand's sect. He was the only one who could do these things. No one else could be counted on. Pulling Princess Xianglu with him, Wuqi dashed to the 18th floor of the cave abode. Princess Xianglu couldn't help but cry out in surprise when she saw the cave abode that was 100 miles wide and soaked in liquefied immortal energy. The four walls of this cave abode were made of white stalactites that were as lustrous as white jade. After being nourished by the immortal spiritual energy all year round, these stalactites were filled with spiritual energy and constantly emitted strong white light, illuminating the cave abode as if it was daytime. Even the slightest detail could be seen. In the center of the cave abode was a pond. It was 100 feet in diameter and several feet deep. It was completely soaked in immortal energy that had a viscous, mercury-like texture. A few days ago, when Wuqi was cultivating in seclusion here, he had soaked himself in this pond. Cultivating here could yield twice the result with half the effort, and his cultivation speed was at least 100 times faster than that of ordinary immortals. The concentration of immortal energy here was simply too high. Pulling Princess Xianglu to the edge of the pond, Wuqi sat down on a stone stool that was almost completely condensed with immortal energy with his arms around her. Then, he whispered into Princess Zhongli's ear that Yu Miao wanted him to help him fight for the power of prefecture overseer of a province. Then, Wuqi told her about his plan and worries. If he helped Yu Miao, he would have to clash with Yu Miao's brothers, and with his current overall strength, he was not strong enough to ensure Wuqi's safety. At least, Yu Miao of Yu clan was in existence as strong as a gold immortal. It was hard to say if one of the elders of Yu clan had a selfish motive, and had secretly trained a few experts for his lineal descendants. If Wuqi were to run into such private guards, he might be killed. Princess Xianglu knitted her brows into a tight frown. She held Wuqi's hand tightly, carefully weighing the pros and cons of this matter. After a full quarter of an hour, Princess Xianglu finally said resolutely, "There is nothing under the heaven that can reap benefits without taking risks. After helping Yu Miao obtain the power of that province, we can totally turn him into a mere figurehead and turn him into our puppet, allowing us to control that province. After calculating with her fingers for a long time, Princess Xianglu nodded and said, "We have to do this, and we must do it well. I've also taken a fancy to that province." Once again, Princess Xianglu put on the haughty smile that Wu Qi was very familiar with. She tilted her chin up proudly and said in a cold voice, "In this world, cultivation base is more important than anything else. I don't want to be hunted down again, to be schemed against again, to worry that my lover will be killed, and to live in fear again." So. A gleam flashed across Princess Xiangli's eyes. She snuggled into Wu Qi's arms and said in a low voice, "Since Grandpa Emperor has approved of our relationship, why don't we officially marry each other today with heaven and earth as our witness?" Wu Qi looked at Princess Xianglu in astonishment and said, "Today?" Wu Qi's mind was in a mess. He was really not ready yet. Even though he and Princess Xianglu were so familiar with each other and had developed a deep affection for each other, and she had approved of his marriage with Princess Xianglu, as well as their relationship, he still felt like he had been struck by lightning. He was caught off guard by the fact that they were going to marry each other with heaven and earth as their witness. Wu Qi was tongue-tied, and he almost asked the stupidest question in his life, "Don't we need to get a marriage certificate to get married?" Just as the words were about to come out of his mouth, Wu Qi bit his tongue and swallowed them back. He looked at Princess Xianglu, who was as proud as a queen, and nodded thoughtfully. Princess Xianglu was right, and her thoughts were exactly the same as his. With the land of a province, their future would be completely different. To Wu Qi, the land of a province was too valuable. It was worth risking everything for them. Princess Xianglu, who was as proud as a rooster, stood up. Her body shook, and her palace dress disappeared without a trace. Jumping into Wu Qi's arms, Princess Xianglu squinted her eyes and said smilingly, "A few days ago, you said that you had swallowed Mu Hao, that god of misfortune. Let Zi Xian help you digest his god power. Zi Xian has a wisp of innate qi, which can help you break through some big bottlenecks." Wu Qi was a little flustered, hugging Princess Xiangli's soft, slender, and flawless body. He asked bewilderedly, "Shouldn't we get married first?" Princess Xianglu glared at Wu Qi, then dragged him into the pond, which was soaked in immortal aura. She murmured vaguely, "The heaven and earth have eyes, they are watching us. They know that we are married. You are a man, but why are you so slow? You are even slower than Zi Xian." Wu Qi's muffled curse came from the sticky, purple-golden liquid, followed by Princess Xianglu and Wu Qi's howls of pain at the same time. Muffled sounds of bodies hitting against each other could be heard. Princess Xianglu complained in a low voice, "Why is it so painful? Can't you be more careful?" The liquid began rolling violently, and Wu Qi's howls of pain could be heard again and again. "You are in pain, but do you think I am not?" Be gentle, why did you bite me?" Wu Qi gasped with a hissing sound. Suddenly, the immortal energy liquid, which was thousands of times heavier than mercury, began to surge and roll up in waves. The immortal aura came from all directions, and the liquid, which had been accumulating in the pond for countless years, was decreasing at a rate visible to the naked eyes. Muffled, thunderous heartbeats could be heard coming from the pond, as if a ferocious beast was being bred and growing in the pond. A terrible aura gradually spread out. It was chaotic, wild, ancient, and full of the unique smell of decay. The chaotic light and the five-colored divine light kept flashing at the bottom of the pond, and gradually, the two lights merged into one, turning into an indescribably magnificent halo. The cries of the gale, the long hisses of the dragon pythons of fire and ice, and the roars of the heavenly dragons kept coming from the bottom of the pond. Vaguely, there were countless shadows of gods and ghosts flashing and disappearing. Cold air, fire, starlight, magnetic force kept flashing, and all kinds of strange phenomena were indescribable. Amidst the splendid glow, Princess Xiangli's sweet moans could be heard coming from time to time. It was like a pool of honey water that seeped straight into one's heart, making all the pores on one's body exude a fragrant smell of honey. The moans were sometimes high and sometimes low, mixed with Wu Qi's howls of pain. It was extremely charming. Time passed by, and in the blink of an eye, a month had passed. Chapter 572. A month later, on the peak of Mount Picking Star, Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu were snuggling together as they watched the moon set in the west and the red light rise in the east. A threatening aura emanated from Wu Qi's body, making him look like a sharp sword that had just been unsheathed. The frightening aura rose slowly and gathered into a sheet of purple mist above his head. Occasionally, some birds would fly past them, but they would be immediately shredded into a rain of blood. After a month of hard work, amidst the endless charm, with the help of Princess Zhongli's ancient divine magic, Wu Qi had completely digested the enormous divine energy he had obtained from Mu Bai. On top of that, with the help of the wisp of innate energy produced by Princess Zhongli's virgin body, he had successfully broken through several bottlenecks and skyrocketed his cultivation base to the realm of 9th tier Heaven Immortal. The wisp of innate energy produced by Princess Zhongli was extremely pure and all-encompassing. It was a trace of the law of heavenly Tao that Princess Zhongli had inherited directly from the ancient heaven god in her bloodline. Princess Xianglu could not use this wisp of innate energy herself, but after making love with Wu Qi, it was completely transformed into his energy essence, which contained an enormous power that was almost equal to the total energy of an 18th tier gold immortal. After obtaining this wisp of innate energy, Wu Qi had transformed it into chaotic energy, and then started cultivating the 7 foundation elevating technique and the true body of heaven and earth scripture at the same time. The energy transformed from the innate energy could perfectly fuse with the magical purple energy produced by Pangu continent, pushing Wu Qi straight to the realm of 9th tier Heaven Immortal. If not for the fact that both of them were cultivation techniques that consumed a lot of energy, and if Wu Qi had cultivated the Song of Gale or the Dark Water scripture, he would have stepped into the realm of Gold Immortal by now. Even so, after digesting Mu Bai's divine power and obtaining Princess Zhongli's innate energy, although his cultivation base was only at the 9th tier of Heaven Immortal realm, his foundation was extremely solid, and his understanding of the laws of heavenly Tao was far beyond his peers. He had reached a realm of unpredictability and infinite mystery. But, as his overall strength had skyrocketed, Wu Qi still could not restrain his aura. That was why a plume of purple energy rose into the sky and killed all the birds that passed by. Princess Xianglu, who was in Wu Qi's arms, had undergone a tremendous change. Originally, Princess Xianglu only gave people the impression of being beautiful and elegant, but now, Princess Xianglu was like a dark orchid blooming in a deep valley. She was full of mystery, but at the same time, she was as dazzling as the aurora, with a fatal temptation. Just by standing there, it was as if the heaven and earth were filled with a magical glow. Everyone's eyes were captured by her. After cultivating with Wu Qi for a month, the chaotic energy in Wu Qi's body kept rushing into Princess Zhongli's body, inadvertently allowing Princess Zhongli to comprehend a trace of the mystery of the beginning of the chaos. Combined with the countless miraculous effects caused by the explosion of her innate energy in Wu Qi's body, Princess Zhongli had benefited greatly. If an almighty expert were to observe with his Dharma eyes, he would see that Princess Xianglu, who was nestled in Wu Qi's arms, did not have a human shape at all. Instead, she was a ball of intense light, a pure and strong humanoid light. Within this ball of light, countless runes were spinning slowly in the orbit of the Taiji diagram, filled with the infinite mysteries of creation and destruction. Next to Princess Xianglu, 9 layers of golden light screens could be vaguely seen, each composed of countless tiny golden runes, giving off an extremely dangerous feeling. Even if an ordinary immortal cultivator were to observe Princess Xianglu with his divine will, he or she would find that she seemed to have fused with the void around her. Attacking her was like attacking the heaven and earth, and would face the crazy counterattack of the Tao of the heaven and earth. Usually, such a strange sign could only appear on a gold immortal. However, when Princess Xianglu, who had inherited the bloodline of an ancient heavenly god, had the cultivation base of a lower-tier heaven immortal, she already had this strange sign of fusing with the heavenly Tao. On top of the mountain, there were only Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu. Both of them were leaning against each other quietly. From time to time, birds would fly over their heads, exploding into clouds of blood and gore and falling to the ground. A thick layer of feathers and blood had accumulated around them. The scene was full of tenderness and sweetness, but at the same time, it was filled with an indescribable strange illusion, which made one feel terrified from the bottom of his heart. When the sun rose from the east and revealed half of its face, Princess Zhanglu suddenly looked up and gave Wuqi a kiss. "Be careful, my husband. You must seize the power of a prefecture overseer of a province." Princess Zhanglu had changed the way she addressed Wuqi. She told Wuqi bluntly, "If I can't conquer a province with the overall strength of a 9th-tier heaven immortal, I'll leave it to you, my husband." Wuqi cleared his throat. Everything about Princess Zhanglu was perfect, but the stubbornness in her bones gave Wuqi a headache. He nodded seriously, looked into Princess Zhanglu's eyes, which flickered with a mysterious gleam, and said with a smile, "If I can't conquer a province, I won't come back to see you." Princess Zhanglu flew into a rage. Her eyes flashed with a blood-red gleam as she said bluntly, "You won't come back to see me? Don't tell me you have another woman outside?" "Humph." She pulled a strand of Wuqi's long hair out of his body, then put it away. Princess Zhanglu turned and left. While walking, she smiled and said, "I'll take a strand of your long hair, and I'll see which woman dares to pester you. Zi Xian will curse you with the soul captivation spell when we get back. Any woman who dares to fall in love with you will be burned to death by the fire of lust." I. Wuqi called out, but Princess Zhanglu held her head high and flew back to the cave abode in high spirits. Wuqi had no choice but to rub his nose awkwardly. A woman fell in love with him? Surely not, right? How could there be such an unlucky woman? With a wry smile, Wuqi let out a long cry into the cave abode, then stomped his feet. Immediately, a ripple of energy veins came rushing out from under the ground. Following the ripple, he darted forward and came to the front gate of the Directorate of Celestials in Anhui City. Yumu was waiting outside the Directorate of Celestials with 200 oracles. From time to time, he would look up at the sky with an anxious look on his face. He had made an appointment with Wuqi a month ago, but Wuqi had not shown up even though the time of departure was just around the corner. It made him wonder if Wuqi was deliberately making trouble for him. Looking at the 200 oracles behind him, he could not help but shake his head. These oracles were all-star oracles newly trained by the Directorate of Celestials in Zhong Province. Not only were their cultivation bases weak, they were not Yumu's trusted subordinates, so they were of no use at all. All his hopes were on Wuqi, hoping that Wuqi could help him sweep away the subordinates recruited by his brothers, and bring him back the power of a province. "What are you waiting for? If you don't come now, it will be too late." Yumu stamped his feet anxiously, and he almost cursed out loud. There was a short-distance teleportation formation between Anhui City and Zhongning City, but the sun was about to rise. If he did not depart now, he would definitely be late for the time being. The Yu clan's assembly would decide the ownership of 30 provinces. If he was late for the time being, he would be lucky enough not to be severely punished, let alone fighting for the position of prefecture overseer. Just as Yumu was so anxious that bubbles were forming at the corner of his mouth, a gust of wind suddenly flashed by, and in the next moment, Wuqi came in front of him with a plume of purple mist shrouding his head. A terrible aura came blowing at his face. Wuqi glared at Yumu, his eyes flashing like two bolts of lightning, which frightened Yumu so much that he took a few steps back and almost activated the bone talisman to attack Wuqi. Looking in astonishment at Wuqi, who was shrouded in a tumbling aura and had a plume of purple mist towering hundreds of feet into the air, Yumu cried out in surprise and delight, "General Tan Lang, what are you doing?" Wuqi stuck out his chest, held his head high, and said with a deep sigh, "After 1 month of laborious cultivation, I was observing the celestial phenomena in the mountains at night and overlooking Pangu continent. I inadvertently gained an enlightenment, and the purple mist rushed into my body. My cultivation base has improved by leaps and bounds, and it has skyrocketed 100 times in just 1 month." Yumu looked at Wuqi with surprise and surprise. He could sense the terrible aura Wuqi was constantly emanating from his body, which he could not restrain. He nodded repeatedly and said, Wonderful, wonderful. More than 100 times. Today's Tan Lang is more than 100 times stronger than a month ago. With the help of General, the power of a province is firmly in my hands. Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed reservedly, then gave a faint smile. Yu Mu threw his head back and laughed. Then, he pulled out the black string of beads that Wu Qi had been fiddling with the last time they met, handed it to Wu Qi, and said in a deep voice, "General Tan Lang, no, Brother Tan Lang, this string of beads is a defensive treasure given to me by my father. It is the best at hiding one's aura. You should wear it and conceal your aura. If anyone asks, tell them that you have just broken through the 3 stars realm of the first Panga heaven." 3 stars realm of the first Panga heaven. Wu Qi did not know what the classification of realms meant, but judging from Yu Mu's words, it was obvious that he was trying to trick him. Without hesitation, Wu Qi took the string of black beads and put it on his wrist. Immediately, a stream of cold air flowed through his body, and the aura that he could not restrain gradually dissipated and returned to his body. Wu Qi exclaimed in delight, "This is indeed a wonderful treasure." Laughing complacently, Yu Mu hurriedly grabbed Wu Qi and strode toward the teleportation formation in the square in front of the city lord mansion with 200 oracles who served as a facade. He had already asked someone to set up the teleportation formation, and the coordinates were locked onto Zhongning City. With a flash of light, they had left Anhui City and come to the square in front of the prefecture overseer mansion. The power of De Yu was extremely strong. Since Zhongning City was destroyed in the case of Feng Lingling 2 months ago, the city had been rebuilt, and all the palaces had been built. Apart from the slightly sparse population, today's Zhongning City was no different from before. Led by Yu Mu, the company left the teleportation formation in front of the prefecture overseer mansion, and walked along the main road for less than a quarter of an hour before they came to a very large mansion. The mansion measured nearly 10 miles in both width and length, with numerous large palaces and auxiliary halls inside. It was the newly built mansion of Yu Clan in Zhong Province, which had risen to power after Feng Lingling's case. In the past, although Yu Clan in Zhong Province was strong and prosperous, it could not be ranked in the top 5 among the wealthy clans in Zhong Province. After Feng Lingling and a group of trusted subordinates escaped, Yu Clan in Zhong Province had made a great contribution, and was recognized by the new prefecture overseer, Bo Zhongfu. With the power of 30 provinces in their hands, the atmosphere of Yu Clan was very different from before. In front of the Yu family's newly built residence, there were at least 600 heavily armored soldiers guarding it. Surrounding the outer walls of the residence, there were also dozens of patrolling soldiers patrolling the area, guarding the residence so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Wu Qi could not help but shake his head. The security of Great Yan's imperial palace was nothing more than this. Leading Wu Qi and 200 oracles, Yu Mu strode toward the front gate of Yu Clan. Suddenly, a burly man clad in a bronze armor cried out in a stern voice, "Who are you? Stand down at once. This is not a place where you can barge in." Suddenly, Wu Qi saw a strange gleam flash across the soldier's eyes. Then, with a loud cry, the soldier drew his sword and swung it down toward Yu Miao. The sword beam was fierce, and when it was still about 100 feet away from Yu Mu, the gust of wind it produced had knocked him flying backward uncontrollably. If the sword were to hit him, he would definitely be killed on the spot. Chapter 573. In the blink of an eye, the sword had arrived before Yu Miao. The sword energy shot out of its tip and broke Yu Miao's hair, causing it to dance wildly in the air. More than half of Yu Miao's hair was blown away by the sword energy, while blood sprayed out of his scalp and turned into a cloud of blood mist that shot backward along with the sword energy. Yu Miao roared furiously as he retreated along with the sword energy. His hands moved quickly, and dozens of talismans shot out, transforming into balls of ghostly flames that blocked the sword energy. But, as the soldier's cultivation base was stronger than Yu Miao's, and he had been accumulating power for a long time, there was no way Yu Miao's hasty counterattack could withstand the thunderous sword strike that was powerful enough to destroy mountains. The ghostly flames were shattered, but the sword continued to slash down toward Yu Miao with an unstoppable momentum. A jarring creaking noise rang out as Wu Qi's figure flashed and came before Yu Miao, grabbing the blade of the soldier with one palm. A tremendous force surged out of the sword, and 9 waves of violent force twisted and struggled in Wu Qi's palm like raging dragons, trying to tear Wu Qi's palm apart and kill him and Yu Miao together. But, as Wu Qi's cultivation base had skyrocketed, his overall strength was far stronger than the soldiers'. As a result, the sword remained motionless in Wu Qi's palm, producing a lot of sparks. The guard of Yu clan sure has guts. How dare you attack a lineal descendant of Yu clan right outside the gate? Wu Qi turned around and asked with a mocking smile. With more than half of his head bald and blood dripping from his forehead, Yu Miao bellowed in exasperation, "Kill him. I'll bear all the consequences." Simply lawless, lawless. A mere servant actually dares to attack me? Upon hearing Yu Miao's furious roar, the soldier suddenly loosened his grip on the hilt of the sword and backed away. But, no matter how fast he retreated, he was not as fast as Wu Qi. With just a slight movement of his feet, Wu Qi had caught up with the armored soldier, then casually threw out a punch with his left hand that was shrouded in a faint purple mist and smashed onto the soldier's chest. With a loud bang, the sturdy body of the armored soldier, which was nearly 10 feet tall, exploded into pieces along with the armor on his body. With Wu Qi as the center, countless amounts of blood and minced meat sprayed out in a huge fan shape. Blood smeared on the ground, forming a large bloody patch. It was not a shocking sight. The hundreds of soldiers outside the Yu residence shouted in unison. They followed Chi-Chi down the stairs and charged towards Wu Qi with weapons in their hands. Wu Qi's face darkened. He clenched his right hand, and the long sword suddenly broke into pieces and fell to the ground. He shouted in a stern voice, "Ignorant fools, do you know what you are doing?" It's time for these servants to be disciplined. They are too unruly. He nodded at Yu He with a smile. Yu Miao chuckled and glanced at Wu Qi, then said nonchalantly, "Brother 17th, you'd better go in quickly and freshen up. The clan assembly will be held soon, and you will compete for the position of prefecture overseer. Since you have brought so many people here, I suppose you have the confidence to seize a province." Yu Miao snorted coldly, gave Yu Miao a deep look, and gave him a cold snort. Then, he led Wu Qi and the others into the mansion without saying a word to Yu Miao. When Wu Qi walked past Yu Miao, he nodded and greeted him with a smile, and Yu Miao nodded and smiled amiably at Wu Qi as well. It was not until Wu Qi and the others entered the mansion that he shook his head disapprovingly and pointed at the puddle of blood and flesh on the ground. Who is out of his mind and causing trouble for Brother 17th in front of the mansion? This method is a little too petty, it can't be shown in public. Laughing mockingly, Yu Miao waved his hand and said, "Arrest all the relatives of that guy and send them to 7th Uncle's courtyard. Let Brother 17th deal with them himself." Yu Miao shook his head and complained, "Why do you have to make such a bloody day on such a good day?" Glancing at the hundreds of armored soldiers standing in front of the gate with a dignified air, Yu Miao sneered and said, "Remember this well. You are just the private guards of Yu clan, and there are some things that you can't meddle in. If anything goes wrong, you will die. It doesn't matter if you die, but don't implicate your family." Wu Qi's ears twitched slightly. Although he had walked more than a mile into the mansion and bypassed dozens of courtyards, he could still hear Yu Miao's words clearly. He nodded to himself and said softly to Yu Miao, "It seems to have nothing to do with your third brother. Even if it has nothing to do with him, he at least knows that someone is going to teach me a lesson at the gate," Yu Miao said coolly. "Humph, I know who that person is. When I went to Enlu County to serve as the great oracle of the Directorate of Celestials, someone from my clan was behind my back and nearly prevented me from going there. I'll never forget that." Leading Wu Qi and 200 oracles from the Directorate of Celestials in Enlu County, Yu Miao went all the way to the backyard of Yu clan's mansion and entered a large courtyard that occupied dozens of acres of land in the northeast corner. Along the way, they could see members of Yu clan dressed like Yu Miao, and they were accompanied by more or less oracles from the Directorate of Celestials. Yu Miao greeted them all the way, and Wu Qi could only marvel at the prosperity of the Yu clan. There were more than 100 lineal descendants, but how many of them were there from the collateral branches? After leaving the young oracles, he brought with him in a side hall to drink tea and rest. Yu Miao led Wu Qi around a flower bed and came to a great hall that was pitch black and exuded a frightening cold air. The great hall gave off a particularly gloomy feeling, and the dozens of armored soldiers standing in front of the hall were expressionless, their aura similar to that of zombies. Wu Qi could not help but give these soldiers a glance. Their cultivation bases were extremely astonishing, and when they occasionally breathed, there was a faint, pungent smell of herbs in the wisps of evil aura they exuded. Then, he looked at their fingernails, which were tinged with a dark green aura. Clearly, there was an extremely potent poison in their bodies. These armored soldiers were simply man-made killing machines, and they were no longer living beings. After showing them his identity medallion, Yu Miao held his breath and led Wu Qi into the great hall. The spacious hall was empty. From the outside, it looked no more than 100 feet in both length and width, but when they entered it, they found that it was deployed with an extremely advanced spatial restrictive spell. The interior of the hall measured more than 30 miles in both width and length, and about 10 miles in height. Right in the middle of the empty hall were placed 108 coffins carved of black stone. A thin man was standing in front of these coffins, breathing deeply. The hall was filled with the sound of the middle-aged man's breathing. Every time he breathed, a gust of chilly, sticky wind would sweep up and fill the hall, making Wu Qi feel a chill run down his spine. It was as if some evil existence was trying to drill into his body, and he could not help but tighten his muscles. Yu Miao bowed to the man and said respectfully, "Father." The man, clad in a black robe and shrouded in a towering evil aura, gave a deep laugh, and said in a very kind tone, "Was there any trouble just now?" Yu Miao sneered, straightened his body, and said in a deep voice, "Yes. I don't know which brother found me an eyesore, and wanted to embarrass me." The middle-aged man sighed softly, shook his head, and said, "Why bother? He has no reason to implicate the lives of his subordinates. After that bold thief's family members are brought here, I'll make them into meals and slowly feed them to these 108 fiend corpses. Then, I'll be able to vent my anger." Slowly turning around, the middle-aged man looked at Wu Qi and said, "Are you the helper Yu Miao found this time? You seem to have a pretty good cultivation base." Wu Qi gave the man a look, and his heart began to race violently. The man in front of him was Yu Miao's father, the son of Yu Miao, the Grand Oracle of Zhong Province's Directorate of Celestials. How could he look like this? Could he still be considered a human? You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.